I'm so excited that you're all here. We are at capacity for the I wrote a solo show, now what? Free Go Solo Zoom panel. I'm so excited. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about what you're going to see, and then we're going to go right into interviews with our panelists. So my name is Matt Hoverman, as many of you know. I'm an Emmy-winning TV writer, playwright, actor, teacher, dad. And in 2001, I started teaching my Go Solo workshops. Over the last 24 years, I've helped hundreds of actors, writers, and regular folk turn the details of their lives and their imaginations into powerful, hilarious, touching solo shows, which have earned them packed houses, rave reviews, industry recognition, representation, book deals, movie deals, national, international tours, school tours, and money. In short, doing a solo show has changed their lives and elevated their careers in all kinds of surprising and wonderful ways. Now, if you've finished writing a solo show or you're just considering writing a solo show, you probably have some questions. I imagine the top three are, how did they do that? And where do I start? And what is this going to cost me? So you're going to hear from sort of two groups of panelists. The first is anecdotal. So you're going to hear from three of my stellar Go Solo alumni who have created solo shows and had great success. And I hope that a lot of you have watched the hour-long interview that I did with Isa Fatima about her solo show, Dirty Packy Lingerie, and the incredible success it's had. That's a very helpful and inspiring interview to watch. So please watch it if you haven't. And we'll probably be referring to it at times during this. The three more alumni you're going to hear from today are Ingrid Griffith, Melinda Buckley, and Lauren O'Brien. Each panelist is going to do an interview of about 20 minutes, okay? And then we're going to move to the second part of the panel, which I'm going to interview some industry pros who will give you some practical advice about how to take the solo show that you've written or that you've dreamed of writing and really make the most of it, getting it out there and helping it have the life that it's destined to have. So we're going to hear from producer, theater and film producer and consultant, Molly Pearson, who's fantastic. Another performer who's also a coach and a press rep and a consultant, Peter Michael Marino, marketing expert, Michael Shine, and graphic designer, Michael Thomas Holmes. All of these folks are going to be available to work with you one-on-one if you'd like, and I'm going to send out a packet after this with each of them has written up a little one sheet about what they do and what they offer to help support you in moving forward. Because one of the many paradoxes about doing a solo show is that you can't do it alone, right? We need support, we need a community, you need a team. I put together this panel because I want to help you start to see a path forward for your show. So many of my students, once they've written a show, you know, it's scary. Look, it's scary writing a play. It's scary being in a play, but writing a play about yourself often and then performing it in front of others is about as revealing as it can get, and it can be scary. And so a lot of times, like, all they can sort of imagine for themselves is just doing it once. Like, I just want to do it. I just want to have done it. I want you to start dreaming bigger. I mean, that's fine for your first performance, but I want you through this panel today to see what's possible. I want you to dream big. We're going to provide you with some tips and tricks and tools that can be practically useful to you and that will inspire you. And I want you to listen, because I believe, and think creatively as you're listening. I believe that every solo show should be and is as unique as the person who is performing it, who has created it. I also think that the path towards production and success is unique to you as well. And you'll hear from our students, like, they took very unique paths towards their success. And I just want to share one little story towards that, which is Robin Gelfenbein, one of my students. I'm sorry. Okay, just looking at a chat thing. Okay, one of my students, Robin Gelfenbein, wrote this solo show about how she was bullied in college. She's a very goofy, outgoing woman who went to college hoping to be the goofy weather girl on the TV station, and some frat guys decided that she looked like Fargus from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and every time they saw her, they would chant out of the windows of the fraternity. They would trap her in elevators and like shouted at her. And she got so shut down and depressed that the idea of being a kooky weather girl putting herself out there was very, very far away. Then she saw a notice on the bulletin board at school saying, you can drive the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile around the country for a year. And she decided that was going to be her path towards redemption. So she created, and she did, and it's actually quite competitive. And she had to compete with like a thousand other people for 100 slots. It's something like that. But she got the job, and then they paired her with a fraternity guy, and they drove around the country. And she wound up having to work through some of those feelings, and they became really good friends. It's a really wonderful story. So the solo show is called My Salvation Has a First Name, which I thought was hilarious. And so she was doing it in the Fringe Festival in New York, and she was sending out all of her press stuff and stuff. And then she got this email from a Broadway producer who said, you're never going to believe this, but my grandfather designed the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. He actually built it. And I want to help support you in getting this show out there. So my point being is you don't, you have to do all the things that we're talking about, but think creatively. So listen, how do what these people did spark creative ideas and unique ideas that you can pursue in getting your show out here? I also want you to hear about the setbacks because everyone experiences those. It's not a sign that your show isn't good. Okay, and if you saw Isa's interview, one of the themes of that was like she would just hit a roadblock with her show, sometimes for 2 years, and then the world would change and catch up, and suddenly all the no's became yeses for her. And this is the last thing I'm going to say. I love all my students, and I truly love all their shows, but I'm going to tell you a secret. The ones who find the most success are the ones who are persistent, who are enthusiastic and creative. They are the ones who keep going. And so that's my big advice to you. My big takeaway is to keep going. Nevertheless, persist and find your community of supporters. As I said, you can't do it alone. Okay, that was my intro. So now I'm going to just very briefly recap like what the path forward is for many of my students. So you've written a solo show, you have it. First thing that people usually do is they do a full reading of the whole solo show. So you can rent a space, do it in your living room. There are festivals like the Spark Festival at Emerging Artists in New York. That's really a festival for shows in development where you can just hear it on its feet for the first time, hopefully with a director. Then you move on to a production. Now, your first production can take many forms. To figure out what works best for you, you have to define what your goals are. And that's where I think Molly Pearson, who runs these wonderful LEAP workshops and does consulting, can really help you define what success is for you and figure out a path forward. What is that best first show? Now, the options are self-producing. You raise the money and produce it yourself in a theater. Or co-producing with a friend. Sometimes that can help to pool resources and audience, like you go off and on nights, you rent a theater and alternate nights, or do a 7 o'clock and a 9 o'clock show, or if your show is shorter, put them together in one show. Or there's a festival. And unfortunately, there's not as many festivals in New York as there used to be, but you're going to hear about some that are coming up now. The advantage of doing a festival is that you don't have to do all the marketing yourself. You're piggybacking off of the marketing and advertising that the festival is doing. And there's sometimes more of a possibility of reviews and awards. And what that does is it sets you up to tour to other venues. Once you've done it that first time, you have a review, maybe you have an award, some exciting thing happened with it. You put together a packet, you start approaching theaters, and not just theaters. I think it's very important because everybody is competing for those theater spaces to think about non-theatrical or non-traditional venues for producing your show. So one thing is obviously colleges, and you're going to hear us talk about how to tour in colleges, high schools, if that's appropriate to your show. And what happens are you may not have written it for those venues, but you may discover, like in Robin Gelfenbein's show, which I just told you about, there was a theme of bullying. So she was able to create talkbacks about bullying and tour it to high schools. And then there are other organizations, and you're going to hear about those kinds of things. Like one of my students, Joya Dakari, did a solo show called Truth Values about her experience being a woman pursuing an advanced degree in mathematics at MIT. And the misogyny she experienced there, she does it now. She's done it hundreds of times in STEM festivals, in women's studies festivals. And sometimes it's really amazing. She did it at some STEM festival at UC San Diego and wound up performing it on the stage of the La Jolla Playhouse. So sometimes pursuing that non-theatrical avenue puts you back into some of the most prestigious theaters in the country. Okay. So that's a very simple outline of how you might go forward with a solo show. And now we're going to have 3 interviews with 3 of my Go Solo alumni. Now, we are going to have a Q&A at the end of this, so you can save your questions. You can put them in the chat. I'm trying to jam pack so much in, so I may not get to your question while I'm interviewing somebody, but we can bring it up later in the group interview. For the first interview, it's going to be Ingrid Griffith. And she is actually touring her show right now, so she wasn't able to be here, but I recorded an interview with her, which I'm now going to share with you all. Hi, I'm Matt Hoverman of Go Solo, and I'm here with Ingrid Griffith, one of my students who has just been wildly successful with 2 of her shows. And here's a little bit about her. She's a New York-based actor and the creator and performer of Shirley Chisholm, Unbossed and Unbowed. Ingrid has been touring Unbossed and Unbowed across the country and abroad for the past 3 years, with the hope that this largely unheard story will enlighten audiences and inspire them to take action that will bring about positive change. And it's won a few awards, like the Outstanding Playwriting Award at Hear Her Call Caribbean American Women's Playwriting Festival, the Danny Glover Power of Dream Award, a Guyana Cultural Award, as well as the 2023 Susie Bass Award, and Atlanta's Professional Theater Awards for Outstanding Production about Social Justice. Holy cow, Ingrid. And before that, if that wasn't enough, she did another show. Her first show was actually autobiographical, and it was called Demerara Gold. And we're actually going to start talking about that one. So you created that in my class.
2012 or 2011. It's about my a Guyanese girl's immigrant experience, and it's based on my life. And I'm from Guyana, South America, and I came to the US at age 12, 5 years later than my parents. And at age 7, when they left, they told me they were coming right back for me and my sibling, my sister. And it took 5 years. So the story starts then. But then the second part of it, which I worked with you on as well, was about from 12 years old. When she did arrive, I thought that was the end of the story. But then I really wanted to say what happened to the 12-year-old girl when she rejoined her parents in the US. So that is the second half of the show, is about the acclimating to the culture, whatever she was going through, things that she never even thought of she was going through. And then there was a sort of like her parents weren't doing well relationship-wise. So there was there's a theme there that I addressed about domestic violence in the home, and what the kid, who's a teenager now, what she did to make that dynamic and change stop in the family. So it's an empowerment story, a young girl's empowerment story.
That's right. And funny and engaging and moving. And so, so what was the first? You said you did it in a festival. Which festival did you do it in? What was the first?
It was Midtown International Theater Festival. I don't think it's around now.
It isn't,
This
no,
was
but yeah.
2014.
Okay. And what was the result of doing it in that festival? Were you able to get reviews? Were you?
No, I can't remember that because they were so, I think I had like 3 performances, but then there was an extension, I think, thankfully. And so they added 2 more shows, but not enough. It's not soon enough for a reviewer to review it and then for audiences to come. I think that's the point of a reviewer coming to review a show, that the play will go for a while or the show will go for a while. So then people can read it and say, okay, I'm going there next week. But next week, the festival's over.
It's very
So,
challenging in a festival, although it can be done, but you have to kind of hit the ground running. And this was, had you written a show before? Had you self-produced in any way before? No. And
no clue.
yeah, no clue. And what was your goal in doing the show?
I wanted to tell this story. I wanted to find the courage to do it and to do it fully. I wanted to work as an actor, and I wanted it to be a vehicle to show my range as an actor.
So you did it in this festival, you didn't get a review, and yet it went on to productions all over the place. So how did that happen?
Yeah, well, marketing, and it had to do with just me hustling and asking people how to do it and if they can, tell their friends and their friends' friends and that sort of thing. I remember my significant other and I were handing out flyers at an organization that we heard about. It was a Guyanese organization. It was like one of the best schools in Guyana. There's like 3 top schools, high schools in Guyana. I went to one, but that was not the one that was having a reunion in Freeport, Long Island. So we drove to Freeport, Long Island, and I handed out all these flyers because it was a gathering of 300 women. It was an all-girls school. And they all came.
So wait, so this was this for the Midtown Festival or?
This was DEMERARA Gold. Yes, this was the
So for that first performance, you went and what a great, and then it's wow.
Well, I just needed to find people, and I knew if the Guyanese audience knew there was such a show, they would run. Right. Because that's the thing. It's an immigrant story, and they know the story well, but we don't hear about it in mainstream America. We don't see a play about it. We don't see a film about it. So I knew I was an audience that would be very eager to come and hear this story because it's so relatable. And I think because they came from Guyana and they were staying at a Freeport hotel where there was this reunion. So they thought, why not take a train and come into Manhattan? We'll be in Manhattan to see Ingrid Griffith, who's a Guyanese, do a play about coming to America. So so that was sort of timing and luck and whatever. But I think that audience, because there were about 300 people, it helped to bring people in the house, get tickets, sell tickets. Of course, my friends in New York and my friends in Brooklyn, my family in Queens and everywhere else came, so it was just about me just drumming everybody up.
So then, how did you get, that's awesome. And I love that story of you being so inventive and getting on that train, going yourself, going to people you don't know and just showing up with flyers. So how did you then get other productions, other performances of it?
So after the festival, I was really psyched. The feedback was great. The audience loved it. And I just mentioned a segment of the audience, but it was not just a Guyanese or Caribbean audience. It's really an American immigrant story. It's just everybody's story. We're all immigrants. So I would have people from Ireland come up to me and say, that is my story. And then I'd have someone from Russia, everybody would just say, I so relate. And because of that, I was sort of inclined to keep going. I didn't want to stop. I was I had just gotten started because I had 5 shows under my belt. Yeah. And I'm saying, well, why should I stop? And so what I decided to do was start reaching out to Caribbean organizations, reaching out to churches in Brooklyn and Queens, because there's a lot of various Caribbean communities in the New York City area. I live in Manhattan, so I just started going online, making calls. As soon as I get somebody that says, please, send it, and that's all they might say. I would just I would create a proposal, sort of like a, this is what I do. I just was part of a fest. I didn't win anything. I don't think I won anything at the festival, but it was they added 2 shows. So they were sold out shows. And so what
So
happened?
just to stop, so that was a great thing. So it's using that first festival. If you win an award, if you get a review, or in your case, we got extended, then you add that, so you have a packet that explains what the show is and the impact that it has. I imagine you send the script as well.
Some asked, some didn't. A lot of them didn't. A lot of the organizations didn't, because I was reaching out to churches and they just assumed, well, she wrote it like I sent a synopsis. Of course I had a website, because I had to create that before I did the festival. That was part of the things that you need to do.
And
So
what was on the website? Was it, did you have a trailer? Did you just have photos?
I just had photos, me in costume. I had a synopsis. I had my bio. I had photos of Guyana. My assistant sort of helped me to the Caribbean, the map. So just to kind of orient people. And that was it. It was really like 3 or 4 pages, because it's very new. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So I would give them the website. I would send this now proposal that I created, saying I've done 5 performances and the show was a hit. And and I would send it to churches and museums. And I got, I think it was a college in Brooklyn that contacted me saying, yes, we'd like to bring it. You would like to present it. And of course, now it's like the money. So I have no clue. And I don't know, I know my community, there's not a lot of money for something like a play. I mean, I know that because I'm of that community. So I didn't want to say something, a number that was not going to work for them. So I sort of said something like in the ballpark of like $1,200 to $1,500 plus expenses, which was getting me there with my props, because I had a chair a particular chair that I use. That's what I started out with. And that's what, that's what I stick with. Sometimes, even now with my second show, I go higher, maybe like $1,000 higher. Sometimes people say, okay. And sometimes people say, could we work this out? Can we, how can we make this work for both of us, sort of thing. So I have to be flexible, because I know the market that I'm in. And I also know that this is a show that I need to share. Both shows, I felt I needed to share it to a community that deserved to hear it and needed to be empowered in some way or acknowledged. And so it was not about the money. I had 5 other jobs, but it wasn't about the money. It really was about getting the community to come out and hearing our story and being buoyed by it.
It's interesting, because in my interview with Isa Fatima, who I think similarly, it's sort of like we create the show often to be a vehicle for our own abilities, and then we have that response of the audience, and we realize, oh no, I'm part of a larger mission here, and it really becomes about sharing that story and allowing people to recognize themselves in a story, as you said, that hasn't been heard, that
Excellent.
they don't see.
And you're so right. And that's what I've been getting. And that's what kept me pushing through. It kept me pushing forward, because I knew there are other people, other audiences like the one I just shared it with, that need to hear it. And young girls, with DEMERARA Gold, which is about the young girl, it starts when she's 7 years old, when her parents leave for the US, and it ends when I'm in high school, like about 16 or 17. So you see the progression, and a lot of teenagers don't see themselves in plays and don't hear their perspective. So young girls would come and say, I want to tell you this, like after the show, and they would tell me their stories. Some were sad, most of them were sad. And so I would now have to figure out what to say or what to do. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist, so then I started trying to find ways to tell them how they can get help. So I was thrown into this thing of me now having to also listen to them because they needed to be heard, and also to find ways to help them. So it was a bigger thing. It became a bigger purpose.
Do you do it at schools now? Or?
At schools, not only schools, but I really, really, really connected to the school-aged audiences. I know they need to hear it and it's because of what I went through. I did not have a support system at home or at school when I came to this country, and it was so important. It was something that was that void. It was such a void that I feel school-age audiences need to hear this, especially school-age audiences in disadvantaged communities.
And how do you get those gigs? How do you get
Once
them?
Again, I reach out to friends. I reach out to schools. I go online. Schools in Brooklyn, schools in Crown. I select schools in Crown Heights, school in certain districts, Flatbush. I go to libraries. I ask if they can give me a list, and I've emailed it sometimes. A list of schools in various districts, like in Queens. As I said, I try to isolate it for communities that I think would want to hear it. And then also I found an organization called Arts and Education, who cater to youngsters, middle school, right? Middle school students. And they cater to them in Staten Island, Brooklyn, the Bronx. And they would book me to go and tell the story to youngsters. And then I started enjoying the thing because the youngsters, like 10-year-olds, were so eager to hear the story. We're so enraptured, we're so engaged, and then we're so willing to have a talk back. And so the talk back was the thing for me. I want this talk back. I was looking forward to the talk backs. It really felt, I could see the parents would be in the background, sort of shaking their head and saying, oh, and then they would come to me and said, he just came from wherever, or and I'm so glad we heard it. And then they're younger than me, by the way, the parents. So they're like, I'm so glad you're doing,
it's healing for them too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And and I would imagine then once you start booking a couple schools, then your packet is growing, right? Your submission packet, you're adding all the places you've been. And did you wind up getting reviews in any of these places? I think you got some awards for DEMERARA Gold as well, right?
I got from the Guyana Cultural Association, I got an award, but I know one. I went to Barbados with it. I went to Barbados with Guyana with DEMERARA Gold, and there's a Guyanese group there, and they offer the Barbadian/Caribbean organization gave me an award.
Let's shift to the Shirley Chisholm show, Unbossed and Unbowed. So you had done this autobiographical show. What was the impulse for doing Unbossed and Unbowed?
I think the fact that I didn't know anything about Shirley Chisholm. I saw a documentary about her and realized that she was Caribbean background.
And she was the first African-American or Black woman to
run for Congress. This was in 1968, and the first woman to run for the presidency of the United States in 1972.
Right.
I had not heard her story, and I thought this story needed to be told. Once again, it's
a historical show instead of an autobiographical show. Now, I'm imagining you have connections from DEMERARA Gold. How was this a different to pursue producing wise, or what was the first performance of this, and how did this start to get done?
Good question. The first performance of it was at a festival. It was at a Caribbean American festival. I applied, I got in, I was still writing the script. I did it anyway, and it won best script. And then COVID started. That was the very weekend COVID stopped everything. This was in March of 2020. And then, so a year later, I get a call from a theater that says, we were in line, we saw this show, we want to book you. It's still COVID, but we think we can wait until 2023. So they booked the show, 9 shows, 2023 for Black History Month. This was a theater called the Aurora Theater in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And from there on, things started moving. The run was great. It was a big deal for me. I've never had a run, and it's a really great theater, really great. marquee. My name is like in lights when all that stuff. And then another theater would call after that one. Atlanta started calling, a lot of places in Atlanta, not only theaters, but schools. Then another theater called, they're called Out of Hand Theater. And they booked me for that September for 8 weeks. And I would do the show in people's homes. They had no space. They would send me to different people's homes, and the people would have their friends or open it to the public to come see the show.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was an amazing experience. And then I got a reviewer called and said, we saw the show. We're gonna we want to put it as part of one of the shows we want to offer an award or nominate or whatever you call it. And so that was that. And then it just started moving from there. One of the people who saw the show, he came to the home show. His cardiologist had hosted the show. He said, I'm da-da-da-da-da, I want to book the show. And he booked like 3 shows in that same run for the Black community. It was a Black businessman. And it just started moving that way.
And were you, was it you were just getting phone calls, or are you still doing Ingrid's, I'm calling people, I'm emailing people, I have a packet, I'm sending it out?
All the time. I call it the administrative part of the work. I do it every day still. Every day I'm up at about 6:30 and I get stuff done for about 4 hours. I may come back in the evening and do it on the other side, but it has to be done. I have books, notebooks of names, addresses, phone numbers, saying when I should call them back, what I need to send them, when, if they responded, what did they say? It's a constant. I've never worked so hard in my life to get shows, to connect to people, to find places, to write the contracts, to discuss the contracts, to
how do you do the contracts? Like how do you figure out how to do that part of it?
The Aurora Theater, that main theater that I told you that booked me for 9 shows, I follow their contract. And so because it's standard and they're a real theater, and I thought I'm just going to follow it. And that's basically what I do. I just have copied it, changed wherever I'm going and the address and monies and all that. And that's a contract. And it really reads like it's a contract. I couldn't have created it off the top of my head. So I just follow that theater's model.
Do you ever, I see that you're a member of the Dramatists Guild. Do you ever consult with the legal people there?
I do quite a few times. This was at the very beginning. I think I contacted them about a contract. And why did something was in the contract that I wasn't sure. So I think Aurora's theater's contract. When I got it, I had no clue. And I really wanted to get some feedback, somebody to tell me, yes, this is pretty general, it looks good. So I sent it to them. So that was the first time I reached out to them. And they have been very, very helpful, always helpful.
The Dramatists Guild, for those watching, is an organization you can join as if you're a playwright, and if you've written a solo show, you are a playwright. It's about $130 a year. And part of the many services they offer is free legal advice and sample contract. Like, what's something key that you would want to share for those at the beginning of their journey?
Yeah, it'll sound very cliche, but it really is listen to your heart. And if you really feel it's something you must do, go for it, no matter what's going on. Because if it's something you really feel you want to keep going at and with, it will come around. Success will come. It's just a journey and the process that you must honor and accept.
And I love to be in your company again. Congratulations and thank you so much. This has been just invaluable.
It's great to see you.
Ingrid Griffith, come on. Come on. I mean, as you can hear from that, self-producing and getting a solo show, it's very easy. It's not a lot of work. You can tell she really is kind of lazy and just lets it all just comes to her. So we're going to move now to, hopefully you watched Isa's interview, and both with Isa and Ingrid, when they wrote their solo show, I mean, Isa had never even acted before. Ingrid was an actor, but had never really written before. They had never produced anything before. Our next interviewee, our next panelist is, oh, no, I was supposed to do something different there. Hold on. Okay, here we go.
Yay.
Hi. So Zoom just, I don't know if you guys got it, but Zoom just updated and all the buttons look different today, which is great when you're running a panel. Those two, both Isa and Ingrid, really were starting cold. Whereas you, Melinda, Buckley, are a seasoned pro. And I'm going to read your bio. You're a Broadway veteran, and we could talk for hours just about that, but Dance with Fosse and just amazing Broadway actress, singer, dancer. But you premiered your solo show, and you had done stand-up and solo shows before, but you premiered Mother and Me, the solo show that we worked on together in the 2014 Fringe, New York Fringe Festival, where it was extended as a Best of Fest winner. Then Tony Award-winning producer Barbara Whitman took the show with director Kimberly Senior, who had directed the Tony Award-winning play Disgraced, through development runs at Chicago Shakespeare, Off-Broadway's Second Stage Uptown, and Bay Street Theater in Sag Harbor. The show went on to the Greenhouse Theater in Chicago, the Jiva Theater in Rochester, New York, Martha's Vineyard Playhouse, the Cape Playhouse, the Cotuit Center for the Arts, Provincetown Works, and Bridge Street Theater in the Catskills, where it received a Broadway World nomination for Best Solo Show Performance. As one of the show's missions, and this is so interesting, and we're going to talk about this, is to support the Alzheimer's Association. Melinda regularly partners with that organization for benefits and events. She's also, I trained her to teach as one of my teachers at Go Solo, and she now is the founder of One Up Solo, where she coaches solo show folks, particularly specializing in helping them later when the show is nearing finish and how to launch it into a new space. Welcome, Melinda. So, Melinda, why don't we start by just telling me a little bit about Mother and your solo show, where it came from, and what's it about?
Okay, so Mother and Me, I know it's a really oblique title. It's it is about my relationship with my mom. I was always really completely fascinated with my mom because she was exotic and beautiful and funny and crazy and all these things, and then and difficult. Very, very difficult. And then she got Alzheimer's. And I like to say to people that the more she forgot, the more I remembered. And that I also want to say that, like, I had written things, I had done stand-up, I had done the Groundlings, done character stuff. My first 2 shows were all character-driven solo shows. And I never wanted to do a revealing show about my life. I always thought, oh, it's so indulgent, no one's going to want to hear it. And thanks to the brilliant Matt Hoverman, who really addresses that and has a foolproof way of making shows not self-indulgent. So this Mother and Me was really my first foray into that. And I want to say that you know, just the other day, I heard this quote about Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes when he was 66. And he never wanted, it was the same thing. He never wanted to talk about his life, but he said he didn't want to go to the grave howling. Mm. And I love that image because I think a lot of times we have stories inside of us that we're maybe afraid to say or whatever, but this really was for me when this situation happened. I did not want to go to my grave howling. I felt like this was a story that needed to be told. So
you were so close to your mother. Losing her was like losing part of yourself, and you were sort of the satellite to her planet, and you felt very unmoored, as I remember. And you actually wrote the play while you were going through the long goodbye of Alzheimer's and taking care of her. Yeah. So you didn't have an ending when you began.
No. And it was very therapeutic to do it. It was also, I'm in a spiritual practice that talks about turning poison to medicine. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, it was a place for me to go and transform this situation into something that eventually became art. It was the process, but and
I think
my mom's a single parent too.
Yeah, and I think what's so key, what you just said is, many things you said, but is that we have this fear of the personal not being indulgent, not being relatable to others. But I believe that often it's the most personal thing that becomes the most universal. So let's talk about, so you took this very personal story of you and your mom out into the marketplace,
Yep.
and, you know, and what happened? So how did you choose the Fringe? So it gets a little confusing. So for years, there was this huge festival in New York called the New York International Fringe Festival, which is what Melinda did. Now that unfortunately is defunct, but there is a new one that our next panelist did called the New York City Fringe. But we're going to talk about, so how did you choose the Fringe Festival at that time? Why'd you go there?
So basically, you know, in those old days of 2014, the first thing I did actually was the Emerging Artist Festival, and I always recommend that one too. But I just, you know, there was a deadline. I had submitted other shows to that Fringe and never got in. And I had done 2 rounds of Go Solo L2s. And in those days, remember, you'd bring the videographer there and we get our little DVDs at the end. And I didn't even have, the show wasn't even finished. Yeah. I sent those 2 DVDs, the script that I had so far, and and I just said, and I'm going to end it. And I'm going to finish this, but, you know, this is my intention or whatever. And I just, you know, like sent it off. And I remember that I found out it got in before I got into the Emerging Artist one. So it was just like, I was thrilled beyond anything. And we did the Emerging Artist first, because that was a chance for me to kind of stand there with, you know, basically you can just be there with a music stand and read it if you want. We had a little staging. I had 3 or 4 endings. And then, you know, we went back in, and the show was called Mother at the time. And yeah, so I just plunged into the Fringe, so excited to have those 5 performances in a great venue. I got the perfect venue too.
And did you get reviews for that show?
I did. The first review that came out was kind of amazing. It was like a tour de force. You have to see this. And, you know, at the time, you know, some of those theaters in the Fringe are like really offbeat downtown, like difficult to get to places. And, you know, my Broadway crowd, I mean, it was a little hard to get people there, but that review definitely helped. And like people just started coming, and I started really having these big full houses. Which was,
what were you doing to get reviews and to get people other than inviting people?
Well, I was inviting people, you know, telling everyone that I knew, of course. I did the postcard thing, dropping them, you know, I did everything that they told you to do. But also, I did hire someone who didn't really do that much, to be honest. A publicist that, yeah. So, but the big thing that happened was maybe the 3rd show. I'm good friends with Barbara Whitman, you know, the Broadway producer that you spoke about. Now, I am someone that if I have a friend who is now, like, you know, in big high places, I actually go the opposite. I don't want to impose. I don't want them to feel that, you know, I want to use their power, whatever. Barbara, just come with Brian and David or other friends, no strings, you know, all that. Barbara came to see the show. It was a really good show, and texted me. She had to leave. She texted me and said, I loved your show. I want to talk to you tomorrow. I'm going to help you move it forward. Wow. And, you know, just thinking about that text, I get goosebumps, because it was, you know, kind of like what everybody dreams of, right? Yeah. You know, you're just like, oh, you know, and then, you know, from there, the rest of the Fringe run was fantastic. Barbara brought all these people, William Morris, like all these like incredible people came, other producers. She brought, she also did, you know, very smart things. She brought like, you know, my story is about caregiving, which happens at a certain point in your life, right? So she was concerned that it wouldn't be, she brought a lot of young people just to see if they related to it. And that was a really smart thing. And then, of course, you know, so many people are touched by, you know, my show is about my journey with Alzheimer's with my mom, but it's funny. I always try to tell people that it's funny. Anyway, so we had a great experience. That's when the Celebration of Whimsy which was the name of our theater, no longer there, but it was a fantastic place. And the guy, you know, we were selling out. So he said, like, look, I'm going to do an extended Fringe thing, you know, please, you know, we you know, pack you for another week or so. So I had all these extra shows. Barbara brought more people, and thus began that journey of working with a producer.
And not to hurt your feelings, but you didn't win the Best Solo Show Award, which was a crime against humanity. But like, I want people to know that it's like, it's not all the good things. Like sometime, and I remember you were very hurt and disappointed by that. If it's okay to share, I already have. I shouldn't. I did. Yeah. Okay, so we don't have a huge amount of time. So take us through what happened next.
Okay, I'll try to be really, really quick.
Yeah.
So Barbara took me under her wing. We interviewed a lot of producers. She really wanted it to be an all-woman team. We
directors?
Yeah, directors.
Mm-hmm.
But we did really have all these women, and also another, you know, savvy producer. She said, while you have done Broadway, you're not a name, so we need to bring in a name director. So that's how Kimberly Senior, who had just directed the Tony Award-winning play on Broadway, Disgraced, came in. Her grandmother had Alzheimer's. It just seemed like a good fit. And she also had great ideas in the meeting you know, I play all the characters in my show. So for example, when we went to Chicago at Chicago Shakes, she's from Chicago. We cast Chicago actors in all the characters of my play to see how dramaturgically that all worked. And
so
that was
not for performance, but just as like a rehearsal thing so you could really see all those characters. Wow.
Like a workshop kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like super interesting. Then we went to Second Stage Uptown with Chris Burney at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a beautiful space. And we did a developmental run there where again, we brought like all kinds of people, got great feedback. And then, and here's like an interesting thing that happened. So I'm really good friends with James Lacine, who is now Celeste Lacine. He is, the New York Times calls him like the foremost solo performer of now or any time. He's a great friend. And he had two friends that were starting up an Alzheimer's support center in Provincetown. And he created the Trevor Project. He's very big on giving back to the community. So he said to me, is like, you know, why don't you, I'm going to introduce you to Molly and Melanie, and maybe you could do a benefit for them. And I was like, I would love to do that. This would be great. So long story, I can't make it short, but Melanie is on the Cape Cod. She knows nothing about theater. She just starts calling theaters. She calls the Cape Playhouse and tells them we want to do this benefit. It's like a 400-seat house. And just so happened that the executive director was Mark Cuddy, someone who I went to college with. And I'd lost touch, but we had been really, you know, good buddies in college. And he's like, Melinda, Buckley, sure. So suddenly we do this sold out benefit at the Cape Playhouse, and it happens to be a reviewer there. I mean, you don't expect that at a benefit. I get this unbelievable review comparing me to Lily Tomlin, but with more like drama. I mean, it was just you know, phenomenal. And then Mark's like, what are you doing with the show next? And I was like, you know, we don't know. And he's like, well, you know, he's the artistic director of Jiva Theater. So he said, well, let's, I'm gonna help you. So it's the second person that just kind of came on board. And, you know, the reason I'm telling these stories really is that the show took on a life. I had a mission with the show of, you know, Matt does that great exercising class, you know, who you're doing the show for. And, you know, it was, for me, it was for I wanted to show that person that as difficult as that 10-year journey, that long goodbye is, you will get through it. And there might be gifts on the other side. And that was my mission with the show. And, you know, every show I would think of that and think of that person in the audience who needed to hear it. And coincidentally, so that Alzheimer's group had only been running for about a year. She just told me the other day that they were down to their last $3,000. And after my show, the whole organization, like a momentum started happening. So, you know, and it was just so rewarding, you know, that connection of working with people, you know, who've been there, you know, it's just that, like that extra layer. Yeah. So I still do it, you know, in plenty of theaters, but now every time I do it anywhere, I find the Alzheimer's Association in that area. We connect, we partner. It's a win-win, really, because the show is so great for them. You know, because it's something else that they can do to bring people in. It's so rewarding for me to have people in that audience who aren't aware of the resources, who just caretaking's an isolating disease. So getting people there in a room to be able to talk and be in community, which theater is supposed to be about. And so I now I kind of lead with that angle, because I know theaters are struggling, and I try to say, you know, like, well, everybody knows somebody in this situation. So everyone in your community is dealing with this, and what a great way to partner with the local Alzheimer's Association, you know, bring my show in, do a talk back, do it, you know, all these things. So I've now been a keynote speaker for them, and but it's, you know, that's again, it's kind of like my my mission.
I just love that, Melinda. And it is, you know, I'm seeing, as I'm doing these interviews, I really see a theme that, you know, it's, as I was saying, it's scary to do a solo show about yourself, and people so worry about, you know, this part of it, of going out and promoting myself. You always feel so scared to promote yourself. You know, you're just like out there, I'm promoting my story of when I was a kid, you know, like, and like, how am I going to get the New York Times or William Morris to come and see that? But if you connect to this larger mission that you're part of, and every solo show, I think, if it's personal and comes from the heart, as Ingrid said, and as you're showing, you know, it does have a larger mission, a larger message. And even if it's just helping other people who are in a situation like you're in, and if you're a human being, other people are in the situation you're in, you know that there is a path forward towards some light. And that, you know, connecting to that, I think I'm very woo-woo spiritual. I really think the universe rises to support us, you know, with wonderful surprises. You know, thank you for saying all that. I just want to talk in our last couple of minutes about One Up Solo and what you offer with One Up Solo.
Great. Well, you know, I really fell in love with Matt and Go Solo, and the process of story and hearing people's stories, and you know, it's so empowering. And I think that, like, you know, for years I searched for a way for how to structure. You know, you have all this, like, and then this happened, and this, you know, like, you've got all this stuff in your head. And it wasn't until, honestly, it came to Go Solo where I felt like, oh, this links to this, you know, like, it was like finding the magic formula. And then I just fell in love with teaching. So I taught with Matt, you know, for a while, and then he got so busy with being a TV Emmy Award winning that, you know, you closed down Go Solo for a while. And I asked, can I put out my own shingle? So what I wanted to do, though, and what we had been talking about was what's the next step? You know, I looked at, like, is there a gap here? So when I teach, I kind of think of it as an L3, if you've gone through the Go Solo program.
So
Or
solo has
some,
L1 and L2, and then you're offering an L3.
I'm offering something like an L3. Also, there are people that don't want to go through. You know, they've had this story for a long time. They've written, you know, 2 hours worth of material. So, you know, for those people, I help them, you know, hone it down using very similar tools, you know, plus, you know, I studied with James Lassine, I studied with Wynn Handman, where Eric Bogosian, all those people came out of. So, you know, I've got my own little bag of shtick that I add to it. But yeah, so.
Well, fantastic, Melinda. And anyone would be lucky to work with you. And by saying you're doing L3, you're helping people kind of make that bridge between finishing writing a show in a class and really getting it out there and staging it.
Yes. Yes. Let's see. We do a finished product. We do, if it isn't a class, we do a 45-minute showing as opposed to a 20.
Right.
And then for working one-on-one, we definitely, I also believe that the ship is not meant for harbor. We create a reading. There's always a goal.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Melinda. And Melinda will be back in our Q&A session. So I'm going to, okay. Up next is the lovely, the talented Lauren O'Brien. Now,
Hi.
hi, Lauren. Now, Lauren, so we've had some folks who've been doing this for a long time, and now Lauren is the newbie on the panel, and I really wanted her to talk because she just premiered her solo show, and she's having great success already, and she sort of understands the festival scene a little bit in New York as it is now. So here's her bio: actress, punk cabaret singer, songwriter, and two-time New Century Music Award winner Lauren O'Brien won the Audience Choice Award and the Excellence in Multimedia Award at the 2020 New York City Fringe Festival, which is different than the festival we were just talking about with Melinda, for her first solo show, Jax and Lolo. Her follow-up solo show, Lolo's Boyfriend Show, I should say that more exciting, Lolo's Boyfriend Show, just won the Audience Choice Award at the 2024 New York City Fringe Festival and has already been booked at the Depot Theater in Garrison, which you just performed, sold out performance. And you're now going to be off Broadway at the Playhouse 46. And attendees of this panel are going to get a discount offer to that if you'd like to attend. And there are future gigs planned, which we are going to be hearing about. So, Lauren, please describe Lolo's Boyfriend Show and how it came to be.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Matt. You followed me around. So Lolo's Boyfriend Show is a show about dating in New York City. It's a tragedy. I'm saying it's kind of like Reese Witherspoon meets Euphoria. It starts out with kind of a fun rom-com vibe, and then we take you to some pretty dark places. My first show, it did win the New York City Fringe in 2020. And I was so excited because we got an extension and there was energy. And then everyone knows on March 7th, 2020, we won the award. And then everyone knows what happened the following weekend. So that was energy. But I'm also a master of changing poison into medicine. And
this show is going to be on my website forever. So the pandemic happened for those kids watching this in the future. Okay, sorry.
So I spent the downtime starting to write a book that I'd always wanted to write because I had had some personal challenges with health issues in my family, with personal losses. I was in an accident and had injuries I was recovering from. And I was kind of sick of tragedy, so I wanted to write something funny about dating. So that's how the show started.
Great. And what were your goals with the show?
I started out with big goals for the show, personally. I wanted to do the New York City Fringe, and I wanted to win the Audience Choice Award because I knew that would open doors. And I also had a goal to go directly from the New York City Fringe to off-Broadway. And I'm doing that. It's a limited run. And I have future goals. I want to work with high-level producers and have an open-ended off-Broadway or Broadway run, national and international tour. And I want Lolo to have a TV series. And it's like
And
right
she
now,
will. Oh, she will.
and she will. Right now, I feel like I'm kind of hitting it. I'm hitting it out of the park, Matt. But
Yeah.
it's not always like that. And you know, this isn't my first rodeo. You know, I had the first show that got shut down. I had written a punk cabaret show
Yeah.
that I toured around the United States and Europe.
Yeah.
But also, like so many solo show artists, like the industry as an actress, the industry was not all over me, you know, and I've heard other people talking about, you know, they're from different cultural backgrounds. I'm blonde and I have long legs, but I still wasn't getting cast. I just wasn't. But I also didn't like a lot of the scripts. I was like, I'm putting all this effort into this crap. So I wanted to make my work. Yeah, and like I said, I had a lot of personal challenges. I was in an accident, had a horrible concussion that took me over a year to recover from. I had deaths in my family. It was just a lot of tragedy. But I think somehow getting through that and working through that gave me kind of like the mud and the fuel to push this project forward and be more determined than I might have been without that.
You know, I just, as a sidebar, I want to say, you know, you showed up to you guys can see the level of enthusiasm and energy that Lauren brings to everything she does. And the level of commitment you would bring to every class, like it was like a rehearsed performance and a fully scripted new chunk every time. And, you know, because of the symptoms from your accident, you get migraines, if you don't mind me saying, and so you'd have to take breaks on class and everything, but you just soldiered through that part of it. And sometimes I do think that having stuff like that to push against, you know, creates in us or gives us access to untapped reserves that we didn't know were there. So, you know, a lot of times an autobiographical solo show is about how something that we thought was a tragedy actually gives us unexpected gifts. And I think it's true in you. I see that you just have such a drive, and it's not a like forceful drive. It's not like pushing people. It's just this ebullience and resilience and joy that you bring to what you do. And I think that's infectious. Like people get excited about your show and you as a person and a performer because of that.
Thank you.
Do you agree? That's my question.
Well, it's interesting with this show because I feel like it's taken a hold of me. Like I have my goals for it, but
Yeah.
it has its own energy. And I feel a determination and a confidence about this show that's kind of unexplainable. The first time I met with my director, I said, you know, I want this to be, and it's going to be a Broadway show, at least an off-Broadway show. But I had the girl balls to say that, which I probably wouldn't have had about other work that I've done.
Well, I think that's so important. You know, I used to, when I was starting out as a playwright and living in New York in a little tenement in the East Village apartment, every time I saw a Broadway show, I would rip off the playbill cover and I taped them on the wall of my bathroom. And then I would make up playbills for my own plays that I had written, and I would stick them in there so that I would just get used to looking at it. And, you know, one of my plays just got optioned for Broadway recently. And like, you know, so you have to envision it happening. That's what I'm saying about dreaming big. I want you guys who are watching this to hear these stories and start to really picture something big for yourself. I think we're taught so often to be, you know, that you're going to be seen as egotistical, or you're going to be seen as a show off or unlikable if you're on your own side. And there's a difference between arrogance and excitement. And so, you know, I really see that in your story. So tell us a little bit about the New York City Fringe. So the Fringe that I knew and that Melinda and others knew is gone. That was like this 200 show extravaganza that happened throughout New York, kind of below 14th Street over the course, and I think it was pretty much the month of August. Now the New York City Fringe Festival, which has now come into being, it started as another festival. Can you tell us a little bit about it and what it's like doing it?
It started as the New York City Frigid Festival, which don't love the name, and it's the Horse Trade Theater, which has the theater space under St. Mark's. They do an open mic every week and they produce a lot of theater there. But the Frigid was actually a great festival, and they had it at least in 2 spaces under St. Mark's in the Crane and sometimes some other spaces. And it was the Frigid Festival because it took place in the winter. It was like the middle of February they did the festival, and there was a 60-minute limit. And that was a great festival, but they rebranded just recently as the New York City Fringe Festival. And they got some nicer spaces. They're offering the Wild Project and the 14th Street Y, which is actually a lovely, gorgeous, huge space. You can petition to do a 90-minute show, which I did, and my show, and so it was great to get to do the full show there. They promote you. There's a small fee to apply, a larger fee to participate, but then after you pay that fee, all of the ticket sales go to you, which is great. They help you promote. There's a really nice community, and there are awards. And then the award winners and other shows that sell out are offered extensions. I really think you can apply in September. I think enrollment opens.
Wonderful. So tell me about, let's get into the details. So what was the budget for this first production? Oh, and I just want to say you wound up in the 14th Street Y Theater, right? And how many seats is that?
It's about 120 seats.
Now that's a lot of seats if you're doing a solo show for the first time. So sometimes solo show artists don't want the bigger venues because they'd rather have 30, 40 seats and then feel like it's packed than have 120 seats and there's only 30 people in there and it's sort of, they're spread out all over and it's hard to get them to laugh. What was your experience doing it in that large theater?
We did really well, except our opening night, which was almost like an invited dress, we had a late time and it wasn't as packed, but we did really well, I think for a few reasons, because some people knew me from the theater company and the cabaret show and the other show and just being around. And I hadn't performed for 4 years. So there's that supply and demand kind of thing. And the Fringe Festival promotes, and I had one in 2020. And they also let you put the show up on discount sites where people are looking for theater. And some of my pictures, one of my many jobs that I've had has been as a stylist for photo shoots. So I went whole hog. I don't like doing anything half hog. I went whole hog for the photos and the photo shoot. And I think they captured the imagination of some people on the internet. And
so keep talking about those because I'm going to show everybody these. So you did all these photo shoots in a day, right? Can everybody see? You can see this, right?
Yeah,
so here's one.
I know I'm speaking in a very non-linear way, but the pictures are really appropriate to the show. In the show, I do 12 costume changes. That photo in particular, I believe is attracting a lot of people who don't know me to the show because I think it reminds them of things that they know, like Legally Blonde or Mean Girls. I feel like that pink, there's something in the collective consciousness that it triggers. So a lot of people are coming to the show because of that. But I have 12 costume changes. The pictures are really low because depending on who she's dating, meow, and that
this is my favorite. Does this get
that got a lot of attention and caused controversy. You and I and the director and I talked about using this as the main photo because it's titillating and attractive and it's the Fringe. But it's a little, we only have one, the bondage scene is less than 2 minutes. There's only one itty bitty bondage scene. So people think that's going to be the main thrust, so to speak, of the show. They're going to be disappointed. And then some people didn't want to cut. They were like, oh, it's a bondage show. We don't want to go, but it's not. It's a misrepresentation. Anyway, I like using it in association with the other pictures, but I think those attracted a lot of attention. And especially the pink one we put on discount sites, and people jumped on those. The other, I feel like a magician opening the curtain, like, can I tell you something else that's a secret?
Yeah.
That especially for, we had producers coming to the show, we have producers coming this weekend, so we did do really well in ticket sales, but like I said, it's an 120 seat theater. We want it to be packed when producers are there. So there's a site called Club Free Time, and you can offer, if the festival or the venue allows, you could put a certain number of seats on Club Free Time.
Club,
So-
what is it? Free time?
It's called Club Free Time.
Why don't you put it in the chat? Because and
I'll put that, but I will put that after we talk.
yes,
'cause
yes,
it's-
yes, yes.
Yeah. So
So you papered the house by having,
yeah, so
having
we
people come
added,
for free.
so we
That's
added
great.
seats.
That's
But
great.
we sold a lot, and the festival that we're doing now did not want us doing that, so they made it a little harder.
Right.
But yeah, that's another secret.
Yeah, so I want to talk about budget, but let's, since we're talking about this, you said one of those pictures caused controversy. And I know we're going to get into this with Michael Shine, who's an expert in marketing, who you worked with on this.
Yeah.
And talk about that idea of creating buzz for your show through controversy.
I mean, Michael can articulate this probably in a better way, but he talks about creating enough controversy that people get stirred up, but not enough that people are going to shut down. So that picture in itself, I posted that and said, is this picture too edgy for the internet? And that caused a bit of buzz on my social media. And then I said, is it okay to use the word prostitute in a play, or do I have to use sex worker? And that caused a real buzz because people actually have strong feelings about that, whether or not we can use the word prostitute or have to. So that caused a lot of buzz, and also caused people to buy tickets because, wow, she talks about prostitutes.
Right. And you also, when you did the photo shoot, I remember you posted on, you posted a lot before the festival.
Yeah.
You posted, I just had a photo shoot and showed some early images and stuff, right? So it's kind of like when we're watching, I'm really into Marvel superhero movies. I'm the last person who's still interested. And they'll post online, here's a shot of Christopher Pratt in his Star-Lord costume in a desert, and we're all like, oh, what's it gonna be? We're trying to figure out what it's gonna be. You can do that kind of stuff, and it's free to start building up interest in your show long before the show is happening. And so you're not just posting the same postcard image over and over, right?
Yeah.
And-
yeah, which I should do more. I posted some pictures of rehearsals and meetings. I also, before I announced the show, I started doing videos where I talked about dating kind of in character. And then I'd have hashtag LOLO'S boyfriend show big and red across the top. And people didn't know what that was yet. And I did that for months before announcing the show. And that got people intrigued as well.
It's great. So how did you go from that? So what's happened is you had your show, which was very successful. You won this award, and now there's interest. And can you tell us a little bit about the interest about doing more things with the show and how that happened?
Okay, I'm also going to move the curtain back a little. I know you start all of your classes with a meditation,
Yeah.
and visualizing is really important to me. I also chant the same mantra that Tina Turner chanted, Nam Myoho Kyo. So I was chanting for producers for the show. And so was the director. And we met, again, behind the curtain.
Just to be clear, you weren't chanting for them to appear. You were literally in a chanting group with the producers.
No. We were chanting for them to appear.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
We were chanting for them to appear.
Okay.
And then also, a peek behind the curtain, it helps the director's husband has produced Broadway and off-Broadway shows. So get a director who has connections. But he's not producing anymore. So he connected us with a production company that we had a really wonderful meeting with. There was great energy. They were excited and they were going to come. And then at the last minute, they couldn't come. So she and I were very disappointed. We were in the car chanting. And then she thought of an independent producer to invite. He came to the show, loved it, is connected with a high-level production company who's produced off-Broadway, who's produced Broadway solo shows. One big one in particular. So they read the script and saw the video and are really interested. We had a meeting with them and they're coming this weekend. Michael Shine also introduced me to independent producers that have seen the show. I've had meetings with those independent producers too. So it's been this joint effort. And I am trying not to get too attached to one particular person or outcome, but to remain determined that the right people are going to step up for us, whether, and we have a lot of people coming this weekend. So if you want to come and be part of history, I have $20 tickets for you if you use promo code Lights On. So.
Fantastic. And then the theaters, how did you connect to the theaters?
Well, the Off-Broadway Theater, Playhouse 46, is part of the Fringe extension. And the Depot, I live in Beacon in upstate New York. And the Depot is a prominent theater up here, and the director knows the people on the board. So she was able to get us the shows there. We did so much promo, postcards everywhere, and podcasts. And the theater itself is great at promoting. So we did sell out, and the night of the show, we were turning people away. I'm sorry they were sad, but it was a great feeling being the sadness. Yes, be sad.
Actors get turned away so much, and your show is all about getting turned away by men. So
Yes.
Lolo gets to reject everybody. That's nice.
Yes, good.
Yeah. All right, we're just about out of time, so I would love to close by just you saying, is there any advice you have for people starting out with their solo show?
See it really clearly, get really clear about what you want, and then take a step, any step, and that will lead you to the next step. Could I just read you from a quote from my teacher? He says, "The individual writes and performs the script for his or her own life."
This is your meditation. This is the meditation teacher, not your writing teacher,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Keep going. Yeah.
This is Daisaku Ikeda. He says, "Neither chance nor divine being writes the script for us. We write it, and we are the actors who play it. To perform your play well, it is important to pound the script into your head so thoroughly that you can see it vividly before your eyes. You may need to rehearse it in your mind." Daisaku Ikeda. So I love that quote, and that's something that I live by.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Lauren. And we're going to hear from her in our Q&A section at the end. And congratulations on all that's happening.
Thank you.
Okay, so that I just want to say that Peter Michael Marino, expert of Fringe and all festivals, so you'll be hearing from, says in the chat, high-resolution photos are required by most media folks. Take special care to make your promo and production photos amazing. Your photos need to get the reader to want to know more about you and your show. And that's so important. And that's why Michael Holmes, who is a wonderful graphic designer, is on this call and will be speaking to us towards the end of this panel. Okay, so that concludes the alumni section of this, which means that Melinda, you are now co-host, and we are going to be talking to the fabulous Molly Pearson. Molly, I am so excited to have you on this call. You know, we've heard anecdotally, you know, what these solo show students have done. I'm going to read a little bit about you and then dive right into some questions. So Molly is a film and theater producer, and honestly, her bio is just like 6 pages long, but a condensed version is co-artistic director of Partial Comfort Productions, which was a 3-time Drama Desk nominated and Obie winning nonprofit theater ensemble, producer of feature films The Green, starring Julia Ormond and Cheyenne Jackson, and Clutter, starring Carol Kane and Natasha Lyonne, guest lecturer at Harvard University, I've heard of it, and many colleges, to name just a few credits. Molly Pearson is an NYC-based independent theater and film producer and a leader in the field of teaching arts entrepreneurship. She is the founder of Leap Workshops, a consulting firm focused on championing entrepreneurship in the performing arts and empowering individuals to create their own work. Over the course of the last 16 years, Molly has worked with hundreds of artists who have created solo shows, feature films, short films, docs, musicals, comedy special, podcasts, dance performances, theater companies, immersive theater events. The list goes on. The company supports a diverse global client base of visionary artists. Molly and her team work closely with these independent artists and many, many, many of my solo show students in supporting them as they endeavor to create new work on stage and on screen. Welcome, Molly. Thank you. So let's just start by, a little bit about your producing background and how you wound up creating Leap.
So first of all, everyone who spoke, Lauren, Ingrid, Melinda, I have so many notes and things that I wrote down that you said that were amazing that I want to talk about if I can. Yeah, my producing background, perhaps not surprisingly, because it's, apropos of the group we're here with, I used to be an actor. I happily and seamlessly segued from acting some 20-something years ago. But I started producing as a way to be acting. And I was young and foolish, which is a wonderful time to start because you don't know what you don't know. So as we get older, we start to, we know all the things we don't know, and that can sometimes stop us, which is something I'd like to talk about. But yeah, so I started a theater company, and then that theater company turned me into a producer. It was thriving for 20 years. It is kind of in a prolonged hiatus post-pandemic, and we'll figure out next steps. But while I was producing theater and acting, I realized how much I loved producing, loved acting, loved producing, because for me, it is, I am a creative producer. I think of it, I'm a holistic producer. I'm in all the, so yeah, the spreadsheets, but spreadsheets, budgets, informed by story, informed by character, informed by why, and why do we need this out there in the world? So I thought all the tools I had as an actor, I could see how they helped me as a producer. And I ended up getting my master's in film production at Columbia and started producing film, and realized at that point how much I deeply love independent film, independent theater. So decided to hone in on new work and on stage and really deeply independent films. And as my producing career was growing, I had so many friends coming up to me, and talented writers, actors, directors saying, gosh, I'm really not working a lot. I'm getting so close to so many wonderful things and options and callbacks and screen tests, but I'm not working, and I'm getting depressed, or I'm getting frustrated, or, as Melinda was saying, the howl. I have so much I want to be doing. And, I realized how much I love helping people do the thing that they want to be doing. There's not, as you know, Matt, with all of your students, there's not enough hours in the day to do all the projects you want to do. So consulting and coaching and mentoring and advising has been transformative for me, because I'm so deeply excited for each of my clients about their individual journeys with their solo shows and other mediums. And I did used to do a lot of workshops in the room and then on Zoom. And my work has veered to more one-on-one work right now is what I'm doing with artists, because I find we just get so much done week to week, and we're really seeing that momentum. Yeah, so it wasn't something like not like all, but like many wonderful things with your shows, with our careers. Leap wasn't something I planned on doing, but it is something that I love doing, and that I hope I get to do in perpetuity. So that's that.
For the rest of eternity. When the earth is a cinder husk, you shall still be producing solo shows.
Yes.
No, well, your work is such a gift to so many people in the solo show community and in the general theater and film and all the communities that you touch with your work. It's so important and this is what I want to start with, is sort of, who comes to work with you and what are their goals. And I just want to say I imagine that many of the people on this call are artists, and that artist and producer, money, like, all the things that involve like creating a project and getting behind it and getting it out in the world are not skills that they would probably lead with or feel that comfortable about. And so that's why it's so important to have your mentorship. But talk a little bit about your work. Who comes to you, and how do you help them?
Well, let me say one thing about that just super quickly. So yeah, I do a lot of work on fundraising, right? Because you got to have the money to do the show. But we don't, and depending on where a project is kind of on its journey when it comes to me, even if someone says, okay, I'm ready to start with fundraising, I go, yeah, you're probably not. Probably we need to go back a little and look, because for me, for these shows, for these plays, for these movies, but fundraising is about the why, right? That's our way. People don't donate money, invest money, give grants, their financial grants to the arts because it's a highly practical thing, right? We give our money. It's an exchange of energy. It's you have moved me. Where I don't have enough money to give you fast enough. You have moved me so much, right? You described your show. I mean, all these shows that I've heard about today, it's like, if they asked for money right now, I'm sure all of us on the session would be moved. We understand the why. So if we understand the why of the show, it makes the process a lot more palatable for most of us, because fundraising, yeah, there's that big wall. Also, as artists, many of us have been taught, many of you have been taught, you're the wonderful, wild and fabulous, artist. You don't do the money, you don't do the numbers, you don't do the spreadsheets. Not true, right? Not true. Also, you're capable adults who manage some version of a household budget in your life. You understand how money works. You have given.
I also feel like it gets frustrating to me. I just feel like the industry keeps shoveling expenses onto actors, so it's like the headshots and now everybody's self-taping at home, so you have to have a little studio for yourself, so and so we're used to it. If you're an actor or even as a writer, you're constantly investing your own money in your craft. So you think of doing a show and you think, well, I guess I'll just do what I always do. I'll just make more money myself and invest.
No, and that's and I get gentle pushback from some clients, but I'm pretty adamant personally, and over the years, and I did the math wrong, I think it's like 17 or 18 years, and now I'm proving myself that I can't do math. But I've been doing this. I would encourage people to not put your own money in, or to make an agreement with yourself, maybe even a little contract at the beginning. I will put X amount in. Sometimes it's, to get started. And I would encourage you to pay yourself that back from what you raise, because you have many, I'm sure, stories in you, projects in you. I would hope, as you're saying, you're dreaming big, unless you guys are all independently wealthy and have tons of money lying around, I would hope that your dreams for your project exceed, the cash that's sitting around in your drawer. So I don't want where you think your show can go to be limited by the checks you think you can write, right? You want to describe. I wrote this down. We've been talking about sharing and connecting. One of the words that trips people up sometimes is pitching. I gotta pitch my show, and I'm like, I don't know how to pitch. I'm like, don't pitch. Talk, describe, connect, share. But again, you have to know the why, right? So when you look at a fundraising strategy for a show that didn't work, I don't mean to be, too simplistic. Surely you have to have the messaging right, then you have to send it out to the right people, but when it's just about you, and it's not about out here, it won't work. But when you can find that way to connect and bring people in, if we can think about fundraising and audience development as a little happy circle, and we're going around, it's a different ballgame. I think crowdfunding shuts a lot of people down. They're like, I don't want to do the crowdfunding. I don't want to be the person online. So there's a way to do it where the message, it's about the why. I have a client right now. It's not a solo show. It's a film. She's doing a farm. She's in Northern California. She's doing a farm stand every weekend to meet people in her community. She's grows some zucchinis and plants, and she's putting stickers on it, and she's building a community base. She's getting donations. So if you trust, as people have said, that there are people out there who want to help you, and you get the messaging right, you will find them. It might not be overnight, and you have to be willing to change how you're doing it, right? Staying flexible. But if your story has a compelling why, there is money for it.
Do you think, I imagine that's so wonderful what you just said. I imagine that artists feel, if I reveal to the community, the world, that I need help and money to produce this, they're going to think less of me somehow. Do
Yeah,
you
you
think
know,
it's
but
not
I
like a
bet,
myth
but
that you come up against?
oh yeah, sure. And I think if you were inventing a really cool product and, you know, some cool, I don't know, gadget, something really cool, and you felt it was going to help the world, and you felt you maybe would get a little, you would take up a little more space and go out there and say, hey, you guys need this, right? But they need your show.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
And so you have to figure out, you're not asking for a handout, and that's not our fault. That's how society has conditioned, you know, people say to me all the time, I can't ask for a handout. I can't ask for, so, well, I wouldn't want you to ask for a handout. But
let's talk about that why a little more, because you say it, but let's dig into, because I think that, you know, as I said, I think a lot of my students, when they first do their show, the goal is to just do it, to just have done it. You know, you're anxious about it. You want to figure out if it's any good, you know, but then you invest all this time and energy and money into doing it in a festival. And then it's like you have the first performance. Oh, it's great, but now it's kind of too late to get people to come and everything. How do you get them to, what is the process to figuring out that goal? Like, what is, because I would imagine it's also defining for them, what is success for me with this particular show?
yes, so when I see a few faces on here that I'm so happy to see, so they know I'm a, you know, broken record. The why, and again, to your question about when people come to me, you may have a show that you've been working on for X number of years, or a script. You know, it's almost like if you're in a long-term relationship, you still got to go back and look at why am I in this relationship? Why am I in it now? It's different than 10 years ago, right? What is it? So getting underneath the hood of the idea of the project, and really, you know, I call it the heart of the project. So it's that you know, vision statement. It's that beating heart of your project that you can return to as kind of a litmus test as you're planning, you know, how you're going to build it out. Is this in line with why I'm doing this? Not why someone else thinks I should do it, but really why I'm doing it. So once we get clear on that, then I ask people to come up with what excites you and what scares you, because that's all real, right? What is scaring you? You know, you can't tell don't be scared. Well, that didn't work. You know, you have to validate it and look at it. And a lot of the time it's like, yeah, that is scary. It is scary that if you put this show up, maybe no one comes opening night. That is scary. How do we look at that and get around that? We recognize it's real. And then we build out our goals. Because I think what people not forget, but they think about the end. But it's about the process. It's about the journey as much. When we're saying think big, I think it's also think big about how you want this to work in your life, right? And how do you want making a solo show to feel in your life? How's it going to fit in? You know, I thought what Ingrid said was amazing about waking up at 6:30 and working for 4 hours. But I definitely have people who come to me and go, well, I can't do that because of kids or work or money or life. And so therefore, I guess if I can't do that, then I guess I can't do this. And that's not true at all, right? It's what's the process going to be for you? What are your goals? What are your markers for success? And when people say, I just want to do it, I say, that's kind of like saying in New York City, like, well, I just want to go out on a date on Saturday night. And it's like, with who? Right? Like, let's be really get more specific. And so
Yeah.
doing it where, doing it how, doing it, you know, for what purpose. So the specificity of the vision, the plan that we're making, that's really where I start with people. And that can be for a script that's stuck, how you hire a director, how you bring on, you know, we're going to hear from amazing, you know, marketing and designers. How do you enter into that conversation responsibly so you can be helpful to them?
Yeah.
All of this work just builds clarity and conviction for you with your own show.
That is so great. And I give an example in the class about, because it's similar when you're writing an autobiographical solo show, you have to figure out this is a story about me wanting something and going after it and either getting it or not once and for all in the end, and, but you have to define specifically what that want is. And, you could say, well, my goal is to fall in love, or my goal is to be a successful actor. And I would say my goal is to, but what does that look like to you? For me, it was always to have a great part in a great regional theater, like a really esteemed, like Yale rep or something, For my wife, she also wanted to be a successful actor. For her, that was wearing a designer gown at the Oscars,
Yeah.
Those are two very distinct versions of to be a successful actor. And we've heard, Ingrid's version of her show and reaching these communities is very different than Lauren's vision of like, I'm going to be off Broadway or Broadway, and like both are valid, but you have to be clear about what that, what the path is you're aiming for. Yeah.
And there's not, and to that point, there's not, this idea of big is right, but big is specific and big is subjective. And big, sometimes the brave thing is to say out loud, it's not Broadway for me with my show.
Yeah.
It's not. And that doesn't mean I don't think it's of that caliber, right? Sometimes the brave thing is really owning what your vision is for it, specifically, right? No, I want to be doing it in parks and community centers and, or I also the bravery to know kind of when it's done, right? Which is a whole nother topic. It's not starting. It's when do I move on to the next one? But that specificity, there's not one size fits all.
I like what you said about parents too. And like, because I'm a parent of a young child, like I have the time for this. My goal might be that I have this creatively fulfilling thing that I do once a month at this venue or something like that. Like that is a goal to have if
it has to work with your life. So another thing I work on a lot with people is strategy. How are you going to do this? Right. And people will make a calendar and then I'll say, can you just as an exercise, show me like what's happening in your life? Like this is your projected calendar. I'm going to do this. And they're like, oh, I'm going to a wedding here. My kid has this. And I'm like, oh my God, work. So we have to be realistic. Most of us are adults who are doing this work within busy lives of other artistic pursuits or, financial pursuits. And they're not mutually exclusive. The goal here, obviously, of course, these shows should be, if it's one of your goals, generating money for you, if and when that's something that, you want to have happen. And not everybody does.
So I have 3 last questions for you in our last few minutes. What are the most important qualities a self-producing artist needs to cultivate in themselves?
Yeah, I think they need to trust themselves, right? I think you heard that a few times from your guests earlier, about trusting your gut instinct, right? You need to ask for help. But that's such a sweet spot, right? Trusting yourself and knowing when, trusting yourself, asking for help and support and guidance, showing yourself grace, and knowing that you have to trust that if you're doing the work, I don't think I've ever said this, but like the way will open up. You know what I mean? It's like I often say it's the Steve Jobs notion of you can't connect the dots, right? That great quote, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only backwards. So you use your yes and you take the opportunities and you try it, and being brave that way, I think are the qualities that you really need, and clarity of your why. That's not a quality, but that's something that you really want to, develop, and staying flexible.
What are the top 3 benefits of working with Molly Pearson?
I think that a benefit is that I'm deeply invested and committed to my clients, to the work that they're doing. I think a benefit is that I have been doing this for 18 years, and I get like, I break out in hives when I hear about people who are saying they can help artists and kind of like, here's the game plan. And I'm like, well, that's like saying, here you're having a kid, you have a pet, here's the game plan. And you're like, but this pet is different than this pet, and this kid is different than this kid, right? So I think having someone who has worked with a lot of artists, knows a lot of things, and is intuitive, not prescriptive, and can work with you to create a strategy. And also, it's like, I could go to the gym every day. I don't, spoiler alert. But if I have a trainer who's there at the gym,
Yeah.
I'm going to go, you
Yeah.
know, and if the trainer like gets me, rah, 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 I feel like I could go be in the Olympics after I, lift my 10-pound weights. That's important. It's a vulnerable, brave, one has to be vulnerable and brave to do this. And it's, as you said at the beginning, I don't think you're meant to make a solo show alone in your room at your computer.
Yeah.
I just don't think that's the way.
And my last question is, you want to share one success story of somebody you've worked with?
I was wondering if you were going to ask me this, and I have a very, it must be because my two children are always asking for reassurance if I love one of them more than the other. And I say, and I can call out people that are on here right now. It's no, because I would say I could give you a list. I could give you a list of, right now, maybe 10 people that I'm working with. We have people who are, here's what I'll say. It's when someone comes, here's the success, is when right now is someone told me this week that they're doing a show about bullying also, actually, and that someone came up to them and said, I think I don't want to be too bold here, but I think you might have saved my life tonight. And it makes me cry, because that's for that show, that if I go back and I do save a, creepy mom who has your, kindergarten picture, I do show people, this is what you said you wanted to do at the beginning, right? That, and you just did it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, and I think that that's as worthwhile as, yeah, my show got, picked up, that hopefully their show will get picked up. But yeah, I think it's when the goals and the why really play out.
That's so great. And I want to close with that, is just one other advantage of clarifying your why is knowing when you got it, so that you can actually acknowledge yourself for achieving what you set out to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Molly. And we're going to hear more from you in the Q&A section. How do I do this? Okay. Next up is someone equally awesome. And that is Peter Michael Marino. Now, Peter is sort of a fusion between our first part, which was fantastic and successful performers, and he's also an industry pro who helps people with solo shows. So here comes his bio. Get ready. He's a producer, director, writer, teacher, and performer specializing in comedy and solo work. Pete has performed his long-running solo shows, Desperately Seeking the Exit, Show Up Kids, and Planet of the Grapes, around the world. He did Edinburgh Fringe for many years with his own shows and producing the premieres of the solo shows. And he also produced there at the Fringe premieres of the solo shows Gary Busey's One-Man Hamlet, as performed by David Carl, which transferred to Chicago Shakes, and Jason Kravitz's Off the Top. I love that show. He's a good friend of mine, which transferred to the Adelaide Cabaret Fest. He created and produced SoloCom from 2013 to 2017 at the Pit, which was a solo festival that launched the premiere of over 600 solo comedies. Bring it back, Pete. Pete frequently collaborates with the Kennedy Center and Washington National Opera, writing their educational live productions and videos. He taught sketch at Pace. He solo shows at the Pit, Improv at Williamstown. And really interestingly for everyone on this call, he regularly offers a workshop in how to write a press release. And he's offering his next one on August 18th. You'll all get information on that. Hello, Pete. So I'm so excited to have you. And I have to ask you to unmute. Oh, what's wrong? Okay.
Hello, Matt. And everybody else.
Tell us, first of all, just tell us a little bit about your shows. And what's interesting, I want to say about your shows, is you do both shows for grown-ups and for kids. So.
Yes, I have no idea how that happened. So I guess my first big solo show that got a lot of attention was Desperately Seeking the Exit. And that was my solo show about the making and unmaking of my West End Blondie musical based on the movie Desperately Seeking Susan, which was a huge flop on the West End. And so I had to write a show about it. Don't worry, I'm really big in Tokyo. It was a big hit in Tokyo. And then I created a solo show called Show Up, which is a solo show kind of about social anxiety and depression, but it's disguised as an improvised spoof of self-indulgent solo shows that uses the collective awful experiences of the audience to create a fictional one-person show.
Fantastic.
That somehow became Show Up Kids. Actually, it became Show Up Kids because some wealthy solo show person who used to write for Letterman saw Show Up and said, I'll write you a check right now to go into public schools and teach kids how to do solo shows. And I was like, why would anyone teach someone how to do that? That is a terrible idea.
I would never do that.
Well, I mean, public schools, that's terrible. How about I create a show? How about you write me a check to create a show where I use the kids to help create a show under the guise, I'm an idiot, I've never been on stage, the person who's supposed to be here is not here, let's figure out how to do a show. And then the last thing I did, which was my pandemic project, was Planet of the Grapes Live, which was an online live toy theater puppet homage to the greatest science fiction film ever written.
Planet of the
And then,
Grapes.
yeah, Planet of the Grapes live, Planet of the Apes. Correct. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. And so I really want to talk with you about the Edinburgh Fringe. So that's kind of often the holy grail for folks, and I want to do it in the Fringe, and I want to hear about your experience there. I want to hear about like like what it is exactly, so that for people who don't know, how you get noticed in such a big venue, how you did it yourself, how you worked with other people there, when you're ready to go there. So that's a bunch of questions, but you can just take it as you will.
Okay, I'll try to figure this out. Okay.
What is the Edinburgh Fringe?
Edinburgh Fringe, the Edinburgh Festival Fringe is the actual name, and it is the largest arts festival in the universe, or in the world. I don't know. There might be bigger ones on Mars. And it was started shortly after World War II when Europe was a mess and they needed to bring people there. So they created this Edinburgh Festival that celebrated the arts, and all the comedians and sketch people were like, we want to be in this too. And they said, there's no room for you. And they said, fine, we'll use bars and storefronts. And they were on the Fringe. And that began the Fringe movement that we now see all over the world today. So I knew that I wanted to debut Desperately Seeking the Exit at Edinburgh Fringe because it's a story of a fish. It's a fish out of water story. It's an American trying to find their voice in a country that speaks the same language. And so my first smart choice was hiring John Clancy to direct it. John created the New York City Fringe Festival, one of a handful of creators of that. And he had been to Edinburgh, so I knew that he knew how to guide the show in the right direction. I will say that originally it was a very depressing, angry, sad show about my horrible experience. And then I worked with Steve Kaplan in LA, and I worked with John Clancy and turned it into an outrageous comedy. So brought that to Edinburgh. I did it in New York first, in the basement of the Triple Crown Theater, because I knew in Edinburgh I'd be in a bar, so I wanted to see how the show worked if it smelled like beer in the room. Learned a lot during that, and then did the show in Edinburgh. I'll be honest, the first.
How did you get audiences there? Okay, go ahead. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Okay, yeah, the honest part's boring. How did I get audiences there? Well, I was doing a show about Madonna and Blondie and a West End musical that was a big failure. So that's how I got audiences there. I hired a publicist. The show was like on the cover of Variety as like one of the big American shows going. It was a free venue, meaning people just left money at the end. I like that because I don't like checking box office sales all day long. I find it very stressful. So it just sort of like took off. It was getting 5-star reviews, 4-star reviews right off the bat. So then I went back the next year and did it again. And that time my goal was to have it move. So I went to a bunch of producer brunches, met a producer named Kat Portman, who produced the show in London off West End for a whole month at the Leicester Square Theatre, where I got reviewed by the same reviewers who had killed my musical. So that was very fun because my show, about the show, got better reviews than the show. So it didn't cost $80 million, so that's okay.
That is so great. But pause for 1 second. Producer brunches. How does one have producer brunches?
Here's the thing. So I run the USA to Edinburgh Facebook group, and I just find that people don't really take advantage of all the emails that they get that tell them things about the largest arts festival that they're investing $20,000 into going to for a full month and doing the show every single day at the same time. And I find that people they just don't do the research. So I started that group specifically for that. There was no place for Americans to go and go, hey, what are you doing? How did I start talking about that, Matt? You asked me a good question.
I'm asking you about producer. So is producer brunches something that they send out?
Right. So that's one of the things that's like hidden. You know, if you don't do the work, you don't find out about this producer brunch, and you just go and you walk around like a cattle with I'm an actor, I'm a producer, I'm a booker, I'm a whatever, and you meet someone, and then hopefully your show gets moved. But they also have tons of, you're paying not just to be in the program, you're paying to take advantage of all that the Fringe Society offers, which are workshops, they call them surgeries, on touring your show, being a sustainable show, you name it, they have something for it.
Would you suggest going to the Fringe and partake? Well, I guess you couldn't partake of those things if you're not in the festival.
Yeah, you can't, but you can kind of just walk into Fringe Central and kind of get a vibe of what's going on. Fringe Centrals don't happen at every Fringe. New York used to have one. It eventually will. Hollywood has had a great one. I don't know how it was this year. Orlando just has a big lawn, which is kind of their Fringe Central, I suppose.
So $20,000, is that an actual budget to go to?
I've seen people spend that much for a solo show. I mean, you're spending up to $5,000 to stay in Edinburgh for a month. You're leaving your job for a month.
Mm-hmm.
You have to hire a publicist if you don't know what you're doing. I had a PR for 3.5 years, and by the end, I just decided I could do it myself. And that turned out to be much better because I was me. You have to pay for your transportation. Sorry. I'm on the Jersey Shore next to literally where the train goes by. It's like a Neil Simon play.
Yeah, well, I'm really seeing your room start to shake there.
Freaking riot. You have to pay for posters and postcards and flyers. You have to pay for food. You have to pay for so much stuff. I did it for a lot less than that. But I also crowdfunded. Molly will be very happy to know that when I crowdfunded, I said, I'm not asking you to get me to Edinburgh. I'm asking you to help me take the first step in sharing the show with the whole world. So it's starting in Edinburgh, and the journey will continue. And it did. It just kept going and going and going. I'm a solo show performer who gets bored of my own work really fast. Mm-hmm. So after 2.5, 3 years, I did not want to tell that story anymore. Mm-hmm. So then I had other people tell the story. I started doing these celebrity readings where I'd get, Jason Kravitz did one of them, where I had other people do my script. And that made me like my script more. Yeah, Amy Marks did it with Nice Tits. She got some Broadway people and did a benefit for cancer, one of the cancer organizations. And I highly recommend having other people do your show, but only after you've done it for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Edinburgh's great.
So you had that London show. So then you transferred to London, or you had that they presented in London, and then did other things come from that before you stopped doing it?
I mean, just like having auditions for casting people in London, like never expected that, you know. I actually really wanted to teach over there, and I wound up teaching at the Actor Center solo show classes many times, mostly how to write comedy. It's very fun when you're telling a bunch of British people, like, so let's talk about Lucille Ball, and they go, who's that? Okay, let's talk about Mr. Bean. We'll talk about Mr. Bean, the way that you all know. Yeah, so I highly recommend the Edinburgh Fringe. I say go to it as a punter, which is what an audience member is called there. Check it out, go for a few days, see some venues, see some shows, see what the vibe is, and then sink all of your money into going there.
Now, what about being on the thoroughfare, or I forget what it's called, where everybody's hawking their wares? Is there like a big investment of time? Were you out there handing out postcards and things?
So I really hate doing that. I have social anxiety, and I don't like people that much.
So you found your own way of doing it. So having
I did.
hook of the celebrity. So when you help the other folks, so when you help people go to the Fringe now, what is how do you help them? What is the advice you give them?
I mean, there's so many things that people need to know. So everyone has a different story. What I try to help people with, I think the most, is how to stand out in the crowd. And that is doing things like stunts. My second year, we had a critical, what was it called? It was a tomato toss where I printed up giant photos of every critic in the middle of the park, and people got to throw tomatoes at them all. Wow. They had to pay for the tomatoes, and that food went to a homeless organization who I paired up with. That was awesome. Another year, I did a social anxiety parade that had about 50 people in it wearing paper bags over their heads and playing instruments, marching through town. That promoted Show Up. When I did a show called Late with Lance, which was an improvised talk show where Liza Minnelli and Hugh Jackman don't show up, so the people in the audience... Are you sensing a pattern here? This is kind of I guess this is my brand.
I love it.
I just did not know how to sell that fucking show. I did not want to go out as this wildly energetic idiot character all the time. It felt like I was working at Disney World. So I just sat on a bucket with a sign that said career advice and had a seat next to me, and like literally would make all of my money for meals just sitting there giving people advice in character, and then they'd come to the show. And weirdly, that, which was 2017, became this thing I'm doing now called Lemonade Island, where I give people free advice, which like gets booked at parties and weird. It's so weird that this promotional thing became, but yeah, doing stunts, how to stand out. When I did my kids show, look, no one needs to have a middle-aged gay guy, like white middle-aged gay guy, giving them flyers for their 7-year-old. They just don't really need that. So like, let's hire like a really adorable 4'11" young female who's bubbly and cheery, and that's the kind of audience I want.
Well,
so that's the kind of stuff I talk to people about.
I'm just blown away. I love, you were just born to be a solo show performer and self-marketer. So let's talk about the kids show. So yeah, I haven't worked with a lot of people who have done a solo show actually made for kids. You know, we've had some of them talk about like Ingrid said, like she realized her show had themes that connected to a school audience, but yours is more entertainment for kids, right? And how did that happen, and how does that work? And is that financially more
yeah, totally. It's the best choice someone else made me make. I mean, it was really just getting that money to like start it was super encouraging, that someone who I didn't know thought I had the ability to do something that would be entertaining for kids. I'd always taught in public schools and stuff like that. So, but I wanted to do something for really little kids, like 3 to 10 years old. It's just the easiest show to promote. I mean, my God, it's like, you know, promotion and marketing is all about finding your audience. Not hard to find parents looking for affordable theater. Not hard at all.
And it is the idea that you do this at kids' parties, or you do it in a venue and then they invite, it's like a, you know, a lot of theaters now are, yeah, go ahead.
It was important to me that it was in a theater because I wanted to introduce kids to what theater is. This is a proscenium. These are lights. These are props. These are set. These, you know, that was what I wanted it to be.
So do you approach theaters and say, hey, advertise this as part of your season to get kids to come? Because a lot of theaters, like Center Theater Group here in LA, never did really kids shows before that I saw. Suddenly now they're partnering with kid theater and they're bringing them in and they're filling their houses. So how do you do that?
I mean, I just ran it down at the Crane, which is a 99-seat theater downtown, and honest to God, there were at least 75 to 99 people at every show. I mean, it was like just so.
So you went to them and they presented it, or you booked the space and
No,
rented?
I booked it. I booked it. No, I just did a rental agreement thing, and
How did you market that? Just personally or through ads or?
Mommy Poppins and mommy daddy groups and Facebook, the Stuyvesant Town Moms group, like groups that are around there. And then after a few years, I applied for the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council grant, which I got a week before COVID. And that was to translate the show into Spanish and Japanese so that it would serve other audiences. So we managed to get the Spanish one up, and that's actually been booked lots of times in Spanish and Spanglish. And yeah, I guess I just kept doing it down there. I mean, this is my thing with solo shows. It has to be out there. It just has to be in the ether for it to be discovered and found and for you to make money. And then I just started doing the work myself. I reached out to museums. So I've done a version of the show. New York City parks. The list goes on. These different 30-minute versions of the show. It's called Show Up, Kids! ! Someone just asked.
Bring it to LA. I want my daughter to see it.
Well, I did bring it to LA, and all the celebrities came except for you, Matt Hoverman. Christina Applegate came. Where were you?
She's B-list.
But LA also, I don't know any families in LA, and that sold out before I got to LA.
Wow.
That was so easy.
Well, come back. I want to ask you now, since you're also being a press rep, and you offer this workshop in helping people write a press release, and that can be very overwhelming for folks. Talk a little bit about what sort of your approach to writing a press release and why people should take your workshop.
Generally, my whole approach is that you're not asking for something, you're giving them a gift. You are providing a journalist with amazing content for them to use on their website, in their article, on their blog, on their podcast, you name it. So as soon as you take away I'm an actor knocking on a door, no one's going to answer, and change it into, hey, I've got this great thing for you, it makes you a giver and not a taker. Also, talking like what Molly was talking about and Ingrid was talking about, find the audience, don't spend your time. I mean, I can't tell you how many people say, I have a comedy show, I want it listed in the Times. And I go, really? Do you ever read it? It's never going to happen. Don't spend your time on that. Spend your time on, I've got a show about pottery. So let's reach out to pottery groups. Let's find people who write about pottery and talk about pottery. Don't do a show about pottery, by the way. I don't think there's a lot of people to reach out to for that.
No, I think there's a big.
Unless it's like the bee story. That would be, if there's a bee story, that would be great.
It's about breaking pottery. When I was in college, I had 3 male roommates, and whenever one of them broke up with a girl, they would all get together and go down to RISD, the school design, and blow glass together to heal. Oh. So I think that could be, pottery could be, or glass. PJ.
Yeah, so I talk about that. It's really, it's a template, and I give you a great one, and it's easy to fill it out. And it's really easy to follow the timeline, and it's really easy to follow up on people. But people have to know that, it takes a very long time to create a relationship with Adam Feldman at Time Out, or Laurel Graber at The Times, or, there's no one left. Those are the 2 people you want to know. It takes a very long time, and sometimes they don't have room for you. So put your energy into something else. Get on a podcast or something.
Thank you, Mike. Peter, this has just been fantastic, and it's a great Thank you so much, and we'll hear more from you in a little bit. and your shows just sound wonderful, and I want to see them all. And this is a great segue into our next guest, who is the lovely, the talented Michael Shine. And oh, I have to ask you to unmute. There we go. Okay. So Michael is somebody I recently met, and I met him through Lauren O'Brien. He's a wonderful marketing pro. And as you heard in her interview, he helped her achieve some of that wonderful success she had with LOLO'S boyfriend show. And he has some really fascinating, innovative, and powerful ideas, I think very much in line with what Peter was just sharing. And the most important thing is they don't cost $1 million. The ideas, you know. And so I'm very excited to introduce you all to him, and he's going to kind of give you a little bit of a background in his talk. So Michael Shine.
Well, thanks, Matt. I mean, the first thing I want to say is I am really impressed by how many of the ideas that we're going to talk about people have come to sort of through trial and error. There's a lot of creativity on this call, so it's very exciting to hear.
Yeah. Well, I love that they intuitively do this, but you have the approach, the framework, a conceptual framework that's really going to help everybody think about how that might apply to their show. Because as I was saying at the beginning, it's like, what is the unique, you know, this is the way Peter does his. How is the way you do that, you know? So why don't you just start a little bit by telling me a little bit of your background, who you are, what you specialize in, and most importantly, how you came to work with actors, writers, and artists.
Yeah, well, obviously a long story. I'll try to give the Cliff Notes version if people still use that term. But, you know, I own a business called Microfame Media, and I never wanted anything to do with business for many years when I was a kid. I was kind of the opposite of those entrepreneurs who said that they were like selling baseball cards and donuts at school. The only thing I ever tried to sell was something out of the back pages of comic books, and I got stuck with all the inventory. So I didn't want to be involved in business at all. I was an arty kid. You know, I wrote fiction. I tried my hand at playwriting. I played in a lot of bands, a lot of punk bands. And after playing in a lot of really bad bands, I got in one that was pretty good. And I took it very seriously. And in my early 20s, I really made a go at that. And we ultimately broke up. But in the meantime, we did all right, you know, and I'm not sure that it was so much musical ability as it was that I was really good at hyping us up. And that was the term we always used. We used the word hype. We never said marketing. I didn't even know what that was. But reminded me a lot of Peter. So some of the things we would do, we used to put up flyers that said Dave Matthews Must Die, because we hated that band. I would dress like a nun, and I would get kids to do the Lord's Prayer, and we would get people to cover that. We talked our way onto Showtime at the Apollo because we knew we would get booed off, which we did, and we got on the cover of New York Press as a result. So we would do things like that. And yeah, I mean, we had a really big following. We had a residency at Arlene's Grocery, which is kind of a famous place. The Strokes started out there. Sure. But, you know, it broke up. I mean, this is what happens to most bands. And I floundered around for a little bit. I eventually ended up in the corporate world, and I stayed there too long. I became an adult, but I should have been there 2 years, and I was there for about 8 years. And by the end, I was miserable. So I had to figure out how am I going to use my writing ability, because that was the one constant in everything, to make a living. And I decided I was going to be a freelance copywriter, and got a few clients. They thought I was good. And so I left my job, and fast forward a year, I had a year's worth of savings. I almost went broke. I mean, I lost all my savings. I was terrified. And ironically, it was because I was really terrible at marketing and sales. So you can log off now, right? but you know, looking back, the reason for that was I had become too much of an adult. So I was now marketing. I was no longer hyping things up. So I took a course in search engine optimization, and I tried to get inbound links to my site. You know, I learned sales funnels. I posted content on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I got no clients from any of it. I mean, I just was going nowhere. So I was at my wit's end. I was going broke. I took a walk around Manhattan where I was, you know, living. I was living in Brooklyn, but I was in Manhattan for a meeting, and I walked past Arlene's Grocery. And I actually had a revelation. I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? I was so good. I used to sell this place out. And now I'm a grown man and I can't get a client. And I had a complete revelation, and I changed my whole approach. And I decided I was going to be a hype artist instead of a marketer. So I started studying all of the people who were actually the best at marketing, none of whom called themselves marketers. So the marketers were all these people who know how to push the right buttons on the social media, right? But these other people were, you know, rock and hip hop managers, really nasty people like propaganda artists and cult leaders, old time wrestling promoters and people like that. And I had this thing in my head, can I apply this stuff ethically? I mean, is this just nasty stuff to do, or can I take the principles and apply them? And I did. I could talk about the details of what I did. I picked a fight with a big guru, whatever. But I ended up building a really successful copywriting practice. It turned into an agency. I began to make my living at that, have worked with some big companies. And then I wrote a book called The Hype Handbook, where I kind of put all of my recipe down on paper, and McGraw-Hill published it. And I'm fortunate in that it's had success, and that's really helped with things. But I've always made room in what I do to work with artists, particularly writers and performers, because that was my background. And my whole thing, the thing that gets me excited about what I do, is that there are all of these people doing amazing, amazing work. And they often don't come naturally to what I call hype. I mean, Peter does. The Oscar Mayer person seemed to. But a lot of times they almost think of it as a burden, whereas all these sort of ne'er-do-wells who aren't making the world a better place come to hype so naturally. So all the worst stuff is getting an audience and all the good stuff isn't. And it's really important to me, especially in the arts, to give those great works an audience. So that's why I always do work with artists and performers and writers as well as the companies.
Awesome that you're doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for you to share with them. Like, if you had one piece of guidance to give people who are trying to promote their shows, what would that be?
Obviously there are so many things. I mean, in the book, I break it down into 12 principles, but if I had to give one piece of guidance that was immediately applicable for perhaps the people on this call who are trying to further what they're doing, I would say that most of the people I call hype artists, who are people who are really good at driving a lot of attention and emotion around what they do for a certain goal, they make it seem like all their attention and success that they're getting comes on a grassroots basis, like that their stuff is so good that one by one word is spreading and this groundswell is happening and this audience is building. And what they typically really are doing is they spend the bulk of their time beneath the surface, forming very strategic relationships with people who have audiences of their own or power to pull the strings in some way, who can accelerate their progress really quickly. We've heard a lot of examples of that today. So Melinda, you talked about that. Again, I've tried to build a system around this so we can replicate our results instead of backing into them. But look what happened to Barbara Whitman, right? I mean, that was the game changer. So unfortunately, we have the myth of the groundswell thing is so pervasive because it's a better story that we all model that. So that's where we get into trouble, because we spend the bulk of our time Instagramming and, you know, doing social media posts and even flyering. I love the original, the idea of flyering in a specific community of Caribbean people is one thing, but just kind of like doing these activities and grassroots things. Now, these things can be very successful. They can be useful, but they are also a slog. It's really a shotgun approach. And as a result, what happens is we often burn ourselves out. We get very frustrated because it takes so long and it's so scattershot that we just kind of burn ourselves out. So I would say that, and we can talk about how to do this, if you can systematically figure out how to connect with the people who can pull the strings in your niche and piggyback off their audiences that will really accelerate.
But yeah, that's the question. Now, it's great that Melinda knows Barbara Whitman, but there's a lot of people on this call who don't know a Barbara Whitman. So how do you do that?
So yeah, I'll give you a couple of tactics for doing that, because there's this idea, it's who you know, right? There's the old boys networks that people talk about, the idea of nepo babies and all of this, and it's who you know. And of course, if you start out knowing these kinds of people, you'll do much better. But in the internet era, we have a lot of access that we didn't have before. I would say that social media is the most powerful tool for doing this ever created, but most of us use it in entirely the wrong way. So if you think about social media, baked into the structure of the technology, it is social media. Anyone who is on there is open to connecting. So there are billionaires, there are investors with untold wealth, there are celebrities who, if you approach them the right way, will answer you on whatever Twitter is called now, or on one of these tools, who, if you approach them out on the street, would have you arrested, would stick their security on you. And the reason for that is that people are very open to that back and forth communication. But then the question is, how do you take that connection from just a connection to forming the kind of relationship where someone will advocate on your behalf? So what I would say is create a list of 50 to 100 people of whom any one person on that list, if you had a close relationship on that list, like Melinda did with Barbara Whitman, could change the trajectory of your show or change your career, if any one person did. And then what you want to do is something that I call personal arbitrage. Once you want to, first of all, do benevolent stalking. So what you want to do is you want to sort of watch these people. And if you can do this systematically, if you can block out a half hour every day to do this, so much the better. Watch these people. And most of the time, what they put out there is going to be sort of professional stuff, and you don't want to talk to them when it's about that. What you want to do is look for a common human point of interest. And I love the Oscar Mayer story. This is exactly the thing I'm talking about. If you have someone with wow, my father designed the Oscar Mayer thing, but it could be you like the same musical artist. You're huge fans of the same minor league baseball team. You come from the same neighborhood. When you see something like that, that's when you pounce. You connect then, because prominent people, wealthy people, people with sway, people with audiences are used to having people contact them to get stuff from them all day long. And the minute that you're, hey, buddy, can I pick your brain? I'd love to get some of your ideas over coffee, or I've got a show, it's really great. That's the minute their cortisol levels start coming up. That's the minute the guard goes up. But everyone wants human connection. So that's a really good place to open that conversation.
But your goal is to be like, you're Dr. Oz, and you want Oprah to feature you on her show or repost something from you. So how do you get from that? I love what you just said. It's so helpful. So you make that first foray. How do you get to, the ask?
So there are a couple of things. I can see that you read my book, so thank you. So I have a concept in the book called mini Oprahs, right? So if you think about, so what I mean by that is Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil are both not successful because they did advertising, because they did social media, anything like that, in terms of tweeting a lot or Instagramming a lot. They're both successful because Oprah advocated for them. And why did Oprah advocate for them? Because both of those people gave up things that were cheap for them to give up and valuable for them, right? So in the case of Dr. Phil, which, and I did write about this, you know, in the book. Oprah was being sued by by the cattle industry because she, I don't know if you remember, she put that mound of fat on stage to show how she lost all this weight. So they sued her. And she hired Dr. Phil as a consultant, but Dr. Phil went above and beyond. He gave her all this emotional support, and it really helped her through that thing. So as a result, Oprah put him on his show, and he became this star. So the first thing I'll say is, does that mean you need to have someone like Oprah advocating for you to be successful? Of course not. The good thing about the internet is that there are so many small niches, right? So we heard about the niche of Guyanans, right? There is the one person show niche, and then within that niche, there are a million little niches. And within each of those niches, there are mini Oprahs. There's someone that my mother doesn't know that isn't really a big deal in the general world. But if they advocate for your show in the Guyanan one person show community,
Right.
they will accelerate your success in a very, you know, big.
I mean, it reminds me of when Mike Birbiglia, who's obviously a very successful solo show performer now, when he did his first show, it was Nathan Lane presents Mike Birbiglia's solo show. And Nathan Lane did not direct that show. He did not produce that show. Somebody had a connection there. And what was great was that Nathan Lane, when you see the name Nathan Lane, you think, I'm going to have a funny, good time watching this. And that was a tone match for what Mike Birbiglia does. And so that kind of thing, I think, is what you're saying is like find those people in the silo that you are pursuing who can elevate your visibility in that community. Rather than sort of blanket out there. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's Nathan Lane, right? Who's a star.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can trade up the chain. There are people in the press, in the pottery press, you know, who might write about your show. There are investors who can advocate for you, but there are a couple of ways to sort of make that happen. And one of the things that I find the most useful, and most of the hype artists that I've seen do this, I've done this a lot, I recommend it to clients, is something I call personal arbitrage. I was about to talk about it and cut myself off. But the idea is, if you can get in the habit of giving up what's cheap for you and valuable for other people on a regular basis, there's a lot of power in that. So early on in my career, I wrote a column for Inc magazine. And this PR woman was constantly hammering me to write about her people. So she got me to go to a restaurant with this gentleman who started a $500 million company. And we had this interview and it was fine, but we did not make a bond at all. And I'm pretty sure he never would have wanted to talk to me again. And then we were putting on our coats, and just to make small talk, probably because I was a little nervous because we hadn't really bonded that well, I said, so yeah, you're from Indianapolis. Why did you move to New York? And he said, oh, because the business kind of runs on its own now, and I really love live music, and Indianapolis doesn't have a good live music scene, and obviously New York does. And I said to him, hey, because this was when I was still in that scene, I said, hey, I still go to these shows. I know some cool bands. Let me show you around, and so I took him out and showed him all these cool bands. This was a guy who essentially could buy anything except for that. That was the one thing I could offer him. And he became my biggest mentor. He introduced me to all of these potential clients who became clients and prospects. At minimum, over the course of my career, knowing that guy was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to my business.
That's great.
So if you can get in that habit of regularly making those connections, it's kind of like building a cloud of goodwill around yourself that you can tap into. That's how you build your own old boys network, which used to happen on golf courses and in country clubs. But now you have the internet. Now you have the social media outreach, these small niches, and you can systematize it. And it's a great way to become someone who knows someone.
Michael, this is so fascinating. I am just time-wise, I'm just going to go real
Yeah.
quick here. So the ask, when you get to the ask, is it asking them for advice? Is that what helps?
I think that saying to someone, as I said before, I want to pick your brain,
Yeah.
it's not worth doing. I think you definitely don't want to ask for a favor straight out. It's important. So the strategy that I think is incredibly useful is to ask for specific advice. So if you say to somebody, one of these people you formed a relationship with, if you say, listen, I have a show in 3 months. We haven't really sold many tickets. Producers are coming. We need to make that happen. Do you have any advice? Now, if the person is prominent or influential, they're going to give you advice because those kind of people like to give advice. They like for their ideas to be listened to. The trick is to then go out and implement that advice and report back to them what you did. Because if you do that, they will become part of the solution and they will take the ownership in helping you solve that problem. So that might be recommending you to a funder. That might be helping you pack the show. That might be connecting you to the people. And it also brings their guard down.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. There's so much more we could talk about, and I want to just say 2 quick things. One of them is, Lauren talked in her presentation about how she was intentionally provocative. And I know in your book, you have lots of examples of becoming intentionally provocative in a space. You were talking about, and you talked yourself about dressing as a nun, and Peter also brought up some things like that too. So just a couple sentences about that, about being provocative and how that can draw on an audience.
Having a point of view spreads much more quickly than pitching how great your show is or giving your elevator pitch. And if that point of view is in some way connected to your show, people will talk about it. And especially if it's a point of view in the zeitgeist, right? So Lauren's example about the prostitute question is really good because her show is about provocation, is about relationships. And there's a conversation going on in the culture now about what words are we allowed to use, right? So when she asked that question, can I say sex worker or prostitute? If you see her show, you'll see why. It lined up with her point of view about how the way the world works, and people got incensed and happy and joyous and spread the word and excited, and and it trickled down to the show. And so if you ask yourself, what is a point of view that people commonly have that I stand against, and how it connects to what you're putting out in the world, and in all your communications, you put that out there, then it'll spread a lot more quickly than if you're just talking about your show itself.
Fantastic. I love that. And I'm just going to say as we close that everybody is going to get, I saw somebody said, oh, are we going to get their contact info, the panelists? You're actually going to get a pamphlet of 1-sheets with info on each of our panelists and what they offer. And Michael offers a wonderful, he's starting a new workshop that's going to teach teach solo show performers or other performing artists how to implement these strategies that he's talking about and market your shows or hype your shows, I should say, in these really interesting ways. So you can read more about that in the pamphlet. Thank you, Michael.
No, thanks, Matt.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay, our last panelist, and then we're going to do Q&A, is the lovely, the talented, but I got to find him here. Look at all these names. There he is. There he is. I got to ask you to unmute. Okay. Okay. Michael. Michael Holmes.
Hello.
He is a lifelong multi-creative graphic designer, but also he received a BFA. Well, he received a BFA in graphic design from the Wash U in St. Louis, then an MFA in acting from UC Irvine. I love it when an actor has a parallel career. Michael's passion for storytelling empowers his clients. His creative campaigns and diverse designs promote each person, product, and project by amplifying their distinct potential and power. Michael believes uniqueness is one's greatest asset, which is really a theme today I'm seeing, and that's how he makes his clients shine brightest. and he has many glasses. As a designer, Michael's worked on Broadway design campaigns with off-Broadway theater companies and has had the privilege of working with scores of individuals and entities, including many, many, many of my Go Solo students, alumni, and many of my own plays. Michael designs all my postcards, creating indelible identity branding, key art, logos, and websites. As an actor, Michael has appeared on Broadway, national tours, on stages across the country, and on a screen near you. He's actually in a show right now. So, but we're very lucky to have him and his glasses. Michael, it's also my best friend. Michael, let's get right to it. Talk about how I'll just say this, what I love about what you do. So, you know, I'm going to start over. I recently went to the Hollywood Fringe and I saw some really great shows there, and I saw a lot of postcards, and a lot of them honestly were not great. And what they looked like was somebody didn't have a lot of money. You know, they were looking to economize. They had a friend who did Photoshop, and it was an image that but it didn't pop to me. And I want you to talk about why you think key art is so important and what your unique approach to it is.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been a great night. Okay, just kidding. Hi, everybody. Thank you for asking this question. I have this, being a graphic designer and actor, I have this belief. Well, I'm a storyteller, and this belief that great key art or artwork for your show can do two things, and should do two things, or it would be great if it did two things. One is put butts in seats, and which is nice. And two, tell them the energy or the story or something about your actual show. A great example of this that I like to say is, if you're doing a production of Hamlet and it's set in Elizabethan times, maybe you have an image of a good-looking Hamlet type who is in Elizabethan garb and looking at a skull. And that is Hamlet. That's your version of Hamlet. You know, it could be of any quality, that photo, depending what you'd like. But let's say that you're doing a production of Hamlet that is set in the 1950s in Texas. Well, it's still Hamlet, but then let's say that you would put that same actor in a flannel shirt, in 1950s flannel shirt. In the background might be some oil rigs. And in the foreground is this skull, and on the skull is a cowboy hat. And that's going to tell you a lot about what is your production. I've never seen this production. Somebody please do that production, because I think it actually would be very successful. And that's what I like to do. And again, there's a lot of disclaimers, which is that there are a lot of designers out there, and there are a lot of great designers. What I do is I focus in on what are you trying to say as a solo artist, and how would you like to change the world, and what world are they stepping into when they're seeing your show? So that is what I get. Obviously generic, I'm putting on quotes, generic designs can also be very successful if they're arresting. And certainly if you hand them out and you're dressed like a nun, those can be very, very successful. However, at some point, the nun will not be there, and it will be on somebody's desk or come across their email, and it has to impact upon them and say, oh, this hits me here. I'd like to actually see the show. I prepared like a few things that I've done just to like rapid fire through them. Again, and some to Matt, not that they're the best designs in the world. That's not, I'm not, there are a lot of great designs out there.
They are.
But I'll just say like what I think what we're looking for. I'll describe the shows. Maybe you've seen some of them, maybe you haven't. But I'll describe why we designed all of these things. I think we know that design has a lot of subconscious meaning to it. It's advertising. So ultimately, I'm choosing to do things in a very specific way to elicit emotion, which is basically what advertising is doing. So there you go. If you would like to do that, I will. There we go. Okay, number one, this is the show that's going to go to the Fringe this year, and it's been around for a while. It's Jane Elias's "Do This One Thing for Me."
Which,
You
which
can
she developed in my class.
Yeah, she's right. There, a lot of these are from your class. So Jane's piece is a memory play. You can tell it's a memory play because of how it's set up. The biggest thing is Jane is telling a story about her father from another time, but from the perspective of a person now. So you can see that there is a throwback to the 90s. This photo was amazing. She has a couple of photos like this. They are outstanding. Also, we made her more saturated as it goes. Also, where she touches his hand, she is more saturated, as is he. And then you can look into his face, and he becomes less saturated because he's memory.
Let me just say, Michael, so that they know, this play is about Jane's relationship with her father, who survived Auschwitz. And all he asked for from her was to get married, please.
Yeah.
And, so the play tonally is very, very deep, very moving, but there's a sweet, but there's a whimsy to her performance and a lightness to it, which I think you've captured so well in this design.
Well, this is no AI. I mean, like, she's looking away. She happens to be looking away from him in this shot. So you could utilize that. There's a lot of stuff. I actually didn't even say what it's about because I'm not sure you need to know in some ways, just because it feels like a memory play. And it has a lot of, the colors are really bold. She's living it right now. This is not somebody, when I was in this grade and then acting it from that grade. It's not all set in the 90s. So even though the photo has a little blur to it, all of the text is sharp and it feels sharp and the colors are very vibrant. And then there's, in the middle of Do This One Thing for Me, there's a bit of a dreamscape. The edges go out to a dreamscape, much like we are taking a journey into her mind and the focus of the story. So that's where that came from. This is David Rhodes. David Rhodes is a multifaceted character man in just like kind of what's the term? He's a bit of a genius. I did his website as well, and we happened to take this photo, and then he said, "Oh, I have this show, and I'm going to tour with it called David Rhodes, Roads Less Traveled, Memoirs and Music." And we found this shot, which seems interesting. He's going to give you something that is a very unique point of view, and everything. Sometimes he uses costumes. Sometimes he uses a hat. Sometimes he doesn't use anything. But what he does use is his mind. So everything is set out of his head, which is why the O is directly from a sonar out of his head. Even though it feels like that, it's, blunt, but there you go. Leanne Marie Dobbs is doing cabaret shows. But in this case, she was doing a specific show that harkens back to, you can see it, an evening of Broadway, leading men's songs and sassy standards served up with a twist of she. So she's doing a twist on classic standards by men, but she's doing it in her own way. So she came up with these promotional shots, and I created the colors that feel kind of like Birdland or something that you would see there. But also has this kind of electricity to it, because she is not a performer that you sit back and you go, "Oh, that was wonderful music." She asks you to engage. So she's got, the purple lapels. We've added the purple in her hat. And it's asking for you to be, and she's looking right at you. So it's asking you to be a part of it. Meaning, if you get this, you're not just going to get like a laid back thing. You're going to have to be a part of it.
Speaking of making you engage.
Yeah, Kim Katzberg is, again, everybody is super talented here. I mean, Kim Katzberg, if there was a box, doesn't look like a normal box with her. She's creating a whole world of characters and ideas and perspectives. And she had this photo. And this is like a standard postcard, right? It's a whole discussion about whether we need postcards anymore, but let's just assume that we do. And this is the front. And in order to view this, you flip it over in a strange way. You don't just flip it like a normal flip. It splits at her torso. So you're suddenly going to see the back end of what she's talking about. And also she sees things so differently. If you look at the typeface, you see one night only, the N is flipped. There are a couple weird things in the typeface that ask you again to be a part of something that feels different, very different, but welcoming in its own way.
So this is the front and back of a postcard?
Yeah, the front is the top and the back flips at the torso,
Right.
which is not normally how they
Right,
would do
normally
it.
there's an image on the front and the information on the back.
Yeah.
So you captured her out of the box performance style with an out of the box postcard.
Right, exactly. And then this last one, if you think that you need yourself on the image, I don't know if you do. The reason that this one is like this is the village Citiate. Citiate is a local term to Hillsdale, New York, and that area, upstate New York. This is Lauren. I always pronounce her name incorrectly. Letelier. I always want to say it in French.
She was on this call, or was on this call.
Oh, she was? Oh, hi, Lauren. I just saw her. And this show is about how Lauren lived in the big city and then uprooted her entire life and moved to a place that she feels she was a complete alien there. So even though she's the one telling the story, it's really about, like, the more we talked about it, the more it's about leaving the city in the rearview mirror and going into this strange place and trying to connect with people. And the village city is an inside term that you only, as I said, you only know up there. So, we added certain things like the sign and things like that, but it's a normal person's journey, and the Xanax, the air freshener there. But, you don't necessarily need yourself on that image. As you remember, the other ones have people on the image, but in this case, it just felt like it was one person going from one place to another, and it was about the difference of those two. So that's why we featured those things on those.
Someone just reposted, I love all these designs, so unique to each performer. And I think that's what's so important. And you also see they're unique to the person. They really pop, and there's a thoughtfulness, to them, and there's a quality, honestly. Like, you see these, and if you're doing a fringe festival anywhere, there's usually some, as Peter was saying, there's some kind of Fringe Central, or every venue has like a wall of postcards. You're going to be drawn to the one that really leaps out at you and looks professional. And these images, every time I write a new play, before I even have a reading of it, often I will ask Michael to design some key art. So key art, tell me what key art is. And
key art is like
a postcard.
Yeah, it's the main design of the main, design elements of the show. So if you think of Hamilton, it's the star, right? The star with the character, the silhouette of the character there. It's the typeface within that, and it's the color of the background as well, right? So it's kind of a whole visual vocabulary that can be applied in multiple ways. You don't necessarily need the star every time. You could just use the typeface. You don't necessarily need the gold. Maybe it's going to go, for 4th of July, something, it would be, navy in the background or something like that. But these are, things that obviously the marketing department would talk about and figure out, how it makes most sense to do that.
When you're a solo show performer and you hire a graphic design artist, they would come up with a design like this. You'd come up with them together. You would have sort of like what's on the postcard, but it's more than that. You can get from them a piece of art that is the size of your Facebook cover photo thing.
Yeah.
There's the little, something for your website. There's something, all of that signage, that's key art. You have this distinctive look to your show. that carries forward. When you send your packet out, as we've been talking so much about, to theaters and schools, you have this this clear and consistent design to it. And I really can't stress enough how important this is. I know it feels like, I think this is an area where people economize, but work with Molly, raise the funds. Do not economize on this. This hugely affects how you attract producers, theaters, and audiences.
If I can just say subconsciously, really what it's, if everything matches what somebody who's putting money in, or even just anybody that you meet says, they say, oh, they've thought through this completely. Right. Even if they don't say it, they go, this person has their stuff together. Even if you don't have your stuff together, even if your show is in mid rewrite, the show isn't completely changing. So you can get this done and you can send it out. And then you have a goal. Oh, I made it into this festival. Great. I'm by this date, I got this. And then I got these things to send to them to promote it. And then you figure out how to fix it.
I think it's interesting that you say, even if it's not done, sometimes coming up with a poster image and the tagline.
Yeah.
I saw some of those, like in Jane's, Elias's Do This One Thing for Me. Her father survived the unspeakable. What is the second part of it? The least she can do is get a life. Like that kind of thing really clarifies the essence, the heart, the meaning of your show. In Save the Cat, which is a classic book on screenwriting, he used to say, design the movie poster in your mind before you write the script. It really helps you clarify, what is that main thrust? What is that mission? Michael, thank you so much. And Michael is you're going to get information on how to work with Michael. I highly, highly recommend it. We're going to move now. Thank you, Michael, but you're going to stay on because I'm going to add our other panelists. Just take a moment here. And if you guys could all unmute.
Hi, Peter.
And where's Melinda? I don't see Melinda here. There she is. Okay, so this is going to be for the next 10 minutes or so. We're going to have a Q&A. So I saw a question earlier. Let me see, but please put in the text now any questions you have for our panel. One thing Wendy asks, I'm curious if Peter could talk a bit about what it's like to take a show to the Adelaide Fringe and how it's different or not from taking a show to Edinburgh. Peter, you're I have to ask you to unmute. Okay.
Thanks for asking. Yeah, you can email me about that, but if anyone else is interested, Adelaide is really fucking far away. It's super hot. It's super hot. It's really a festival that's a little bit more interested in physical things, clowning, music, over-the-top big things. Solo shows are a bit of a challenge there. Really quick story, when I brought Desperately Seeking the Exit there after selling out for 2 years in Edinburgh, no one was coming to my show. Then I found out that no one in Adelaide cares about musicals because Australia really hadn't presented many musicals to the world in 2014. So I had to get people to come to my show, so I just went to all the gay bars and just was like, Madonna, Blondie, Madonna, Blondie. They all came, they all reviewed it. I didn't get laid, but it was worth it.
Yes, I have. Okay. Jackie asks, what is the best approach to finding a director if they don't know you or your work?
Can I jump in there
Sure.
on that one? So I think you have to think really clearly about what either you have an actual list of people who you want to reach out to, some directors you're interested in, or you reach out. I often suggest you make a kind of informal advisory panel of colleagues and friends. You put together an actual description of what you're looking for. And if you say a sense of humor, hopefully these people know what your sense of humor is. They understand the tone of your work. And then you have a list of recommended people. You're not just posting it, blindly out there in the world. And then share the script with the people that you're interested in meeting with if they're interested, and then you interview them. And it's like a date, right? What's good for someone else there may not be chemistry there with you. You want to also have callbacks, which I find that a lot of people feel, oh God, I couldn't ask that person to meet with me again. But as an actor, you would be, joyful, not offended if someone has to meet with you again. This is your baby. This is really important. So you take your time. You got to move slowly. This is a really big relationship. It's unfortunate how much time I spent helping people extract themselves from relationships that they got into too quickly with the director. So you want to feel that chemistry. You want to, have a few meetings, really feel like they're elevating and expanding your work. But your best bet starting out is also people whose work you've seen that you like, that fits in with what you're looking for, right? But find those trusted people around you who you can ask.
I want to add on to that. So great. And I really want to say that, we are very vulnerable as solo show performers with a director. If you're a playwright and there's a director, you're both watching rehearsal and you can sort of even argue over like, well, I think that moment should be this. When you're doing a solo show, the director tells you, oh, that's not working or whatever, and directors are used to often with actors, thinking of actors as a color in the painting they're creating. It's a different relationship when they're directing a solo show because you are the creator and you are their boss. And their job is to help you bring out your vision, not show their contribution by imposing or changing something essential about your show. So I think what Molly's saying is very important, to find that person who's really aligned with you. And a lot of times my students will say, I kind of have a choice between somebody I really trust and know and this fancy director who might help me move my show in some way. What do I do? Any thoughts on that, panel? I saw a head shake from a couple people. Anybody want to say anything?
You go with a person. I mean, hopefully they're not totally mutually exclusive, but I go for the shiny resume. You've got to know why it matters to them too, right? They can be working on a bunch of projects, that's fine, but you have to know what their why is, what their in is with the project as well.
Okay. Michael Shine.
Okay.
Go ahead, Melinda.
No, I was just going to say that, I had the experience of working with someone that was brought to me. Ultimately it was a good experience, but boy, there was a lot of, you're not getting this, you know what I mean? Like, because it was, so it's hard, because it's your baby. And, if you come up in a class like Matt's or whatever, you've got this community of really positive energy around you who really get you and your story. So that's really important when you interview directors to get to feel like that, because sometimes, like that's the other side of working with a producer, is that like they're bringing in other people and you have to maintain your kind of vision and goal.
Thank you. Katie asks, Michael Shine, is being on social media unavoidable? I quit years ago and never regretted it.
I don't think it's unavoidable at all. I think you can do well without social media. People have been doing the kind of stuff I'm talking about before there was electricity. In fact, I think that people get it backwards. They start with the newest technology trend and think how they can fit their big idea into that. What you should do instead is think about how human psychology works and then figure out which technology, even if it's a sign, fits that human psychology. Just to give you a very, very, very quick example of that, we had a client whose business was facilitating meetings in a new way. And we could have used social, we could have used SEO. What we had him do is we had him put a sandwich board on and stand in front of the downtown skyscrapers where a lot of the big business meetings happen, and we filmed it. And he said, your meetings suck, let me make them better. And people said yes, and they went up and we filmed it, and then we put that live, and it created a lot of business because every deal was worth 50 grand for him. You know what I mean? So he needed 10 clients. He didn't need 10,000. So start with the psychology, start with the hype, and then figure out the right technology, even if it's a sign.
This question from Valerie is how to get help with organizing your contacts and making a MailChimp or constant contact list for your target audience. What is the best thing to do? And what do you recommend for email blasts and how to organize them? And what is the most effective? That's a lot. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I don't want to do two in a row, but I have a lot of experience. So there's two ways to answer this. I mean, there are tools. I mean, it's a technical question. There's ActiveCampaign, there's MailChimp, there are consultants that help with this. But I've done my best work on an Excel spreadsheet with 100 names. You know what I mean? I mean, I put the names, I put the email addresses, I put the social media. So again, it goes back to that same thing. What are you trying to achieve? And then find the right technology. And if you have to hire someone to help with that, there are people on Upwork who can do that quickly. But start with what you're trying to achieve and what result you're trying to get, and then pick the technology and match it to it.
Great, thank you.
I'd also,
yeah, go ahead.
I'd also add, just invite people that you want to see, like, just focus on the people that you need to see your show, and not everyone. Just the same as press. Just spend your time being careful and personal.
Awesome. Jasmine asks, has anyone sold their show as a movie script? I had a director asked to acquire the rights to mine, but she didn't feel like a good fit. It hadn't occurred to me that this was even a possibility. Ideas how to do it. I will just say, Jasmine, watch Isa Fatima's interview, because she turned her show into a film that was bought by Sony. So, and I'm sure you could contact her through her website and ask her about that. Do you know of anyone, asks Danielle, who has turned their solo show into a memoir? And if so, what was that process like? Well, Lauren has done that.
I wrote a draft of a novel first, LOLO'S boyfriend book. And then I started sending it out, and we got some responses, but no takers. Then I turned it into a solo show, and I'm working on rewrites, but I did a very small experiment sending it out to literary agents, and I got a lot. I only sent it to 5 and got 2 responses, and one of them said they're gonna come to the show this weekend. So it's interesting how they feed each other. So I'm in the process of doing
Fantastic.
that.
Caroline asks, what are your thoughts on sharing your show as a video recording with industry people? Is it best to get them to come see it live? I've noticed sometimes people will request to see a recording of the show, such a different experience. You know, I'm sure you invite people, oh yeah, I can't make it, but send me a video. How do you feel about that? Melinda, have you had experience with that?
Yeah, I like to, and I'm not happy with the videos. I mean, they're good and things, but it's just such a different experience when they're there in the room. And so I try to send them clips, snippets, things like that. It's really only if like a theater says, like, and actually would prefer theaters to read it. But I will send, and I won't send a fancy one. I'll send like, this is a great back of the house video that we did at Jiva. Something like that.
I'm going to add to that. It's got to be really, really good. I mean, as someone who went through like over 1,500 applications for a solo show festival, it's just like casting. I know in the first 30 seconds if this person has it or is, like, I know they have it if they're putting the time into making a great video that is 2.5, 3 minutes long that tells me everything, rather than me having to like watch the curtain go up and hear the house speak. I don't want to. I just want to watch parts of your show that are great.
Michael? Oh, I have to. Yeah. I'm asking you to unmute.
I'm trying to do it. Let me just add to that like if they're asking for a video of your show, that's awesome. You can give them like whatever you think is great. If it's great, even better. Like a little teaser is fantastic because it's exciting. But also if you have that kind of like whole thought through design thing, not just promoting me, just saying, then really again promotionally in their mind they're like, oh, I can just import this show. They have a design, they have this stuff together, they know what they're doing. Look at this well edited video, this is awesome. You could literally say one line in it and that line is brilliant, like, and that's what I learned. boo, and that's it. And they'll be like, perfect, let me get a meeting. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, less is more sometimes in that case. If you give them the entire video, like, they've seen it,
Yeah.
you know?
You-
So,
Can I piggyback real quick on that? You know, Matt, when you and Robin used to do that marketing class back in the day, I remember before doing the Fringe, like reading that, and it was just so enlightening because it flipped the switch in a way that like you have to do the work for these people. You know, like a lot of people think like I'm going to get in the, here, do my show, and then you're going to save me, or you're going to do like all the work. It's actually just the opposite. You need to get all your marketing stuff, all like, I send people like, here's an article that was written about me in close to your area, just give them as much as possible, make their lives easy.
Yes, Molly, last thought.
This is actually about a question that I saw in here that I just want to say like 5 words about. Someone asked, how much should you expect to pay a director? And I just want to say something about that because I think that's the kind of thing that people get worried, that things cost a set amount. I always say that's like, how much does it cost to go to dinner in New York? What kind of dinner? Also, how much money do you have? But also like, how much time do you have? What kind of food are you looking for? What kind of experience are you looking for? So, it's all relative to the why, to what you are doing, to your show, to what the goals are, the budget of your show, right? And then that rate, that's up to that adult to tell you, yeah, I can do it for that I can make that decision, but you're not, people don't have a set rate. Oh, I'm $800 a day as a director. No, what's the budget? If your budget's $10 million, I expect you're paying the director appropriately versus if it's $1,000, right? So don't get hung up on there's like a set number and it has to be that number.
Thank you. I get that question all the time, and I appreciate that. Can we go over 2 more minutes, you guys, or should we end it? I'm happy. Okay, let's go. Yes. I thought this was really an interesting question from Melissa. Can someone talk about approaching corporations who might want to fill their event schedules for their employees, perhaps HR offices? Melinda, I know you direct. So looking at other venues, like, has anybody done, I will say, Melissa, that one of my students, Brian Longwell, is a non-motivational speaker. He's a stand-up comedian who does solo shows, and it's a send-up of a corporate talk, and it's hilarious. And he uses technology, and it's just an overhead projection with hand drawings and everything, and it's all about, and it's called Why Work. I think and so people come and drag their butts in to see this, and then they realize, oh my God, this is so hilarious. Now I know Melinda has done just independently of this a lot of industry shows. Do you think are there certain solo shows you think that would work in a corporate setting?
I think there absolutely are. I will say that like, and probably Michael can also speak to this, Michael Shine, because you've been in the corporate world. My experience has been like that they're so careful. Like, try to book an improv group for a corporate show, and they're, and you get all these people, they're so afraid that what are they going to say? And, they might say something in HR, so there's a lot of carefulness around the topic and around the, and how it's handled, like, has to be really clean, things like that. But, like the demotivational speaker, there's lots of slots for that individual that has, some shtick. That's like a keynote speaker. I'm working with someone now who is an ex-Rockette, and we're creating a keynote for her where she's talking about like, being a cog in the machine. How do you survive being a cog in a machine? And, and feel like you're valued or something like that. So there are slots for things like that. And I do think, I think that Goya's probably had some success with, you talked about the STEM conferences. There are things like that, her show is like really slots into that because it's Tufts University. I mean, she's playing to academic audiences.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I would add, right. I mean, corporate works, but it's a little harder because exactly. They're very safe, and they sometimes want to add a little fun but where I will say there is a lot of opportunity are conferences in general. So there are these conferences that really try to create a almost TED-esque interactive experience. They pay very, very well. So I've been at ones where they had interesting music things, where they had theatrical performances. One is called BIF, Business Innovation Factory. There was one that used to be called Future of Storytelling. Probably fewer of them now than before the pandemic, but they're coming back. And that is thinking about it, I think that would be a wonderful place, because they love to think of themselves as capital I innovative. They love bringing an artist in to give a little, spice to the corporate proceedings. You know what I mean? So that's a good opportunity to play with.
And then they record those and feed them into the AI.
Right, that's where we're headed. So move in quick.
So get there fast.
Got a couple months.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was one last question just about setting up panels of experts on your show's themes for a Q&A after the show. I think that's a great idea. If you watched Isa's interview, one of the things that was great that she did that for some early shows. And she brought in a professor from a university, and that led to her, if not her first, one of her first bookings at a college. So I think it's a really smart idea if you can. Sometimes with a Fringe festival, you only have a certain amount of time, so you can't do a panel. But if there's an opportunity to do a panel on bringing out a theme like that, and invite people from colleges, then they'll be like, God, this is great. We should bring it to my school. That can be a great avenue into doing colleges. Okay, we're going to end there. I just want to say, so as I said, everybody on this call is going to get a packet with information from all these people about, and you should hire them and use their services. If you're watching this on my website online, there's going to be links below that, so you can connect and work with these folks. And of course, if you haven't written a show, or you'd like to write a new show or work on your show, I teach folks how to create solo shows in my Go Solo workshop. And I have a level 1 workshops that will meet on Thursdays, starting Thursday, July 25th. And you can email me at info@go-solo.org. My voice is just about to give out. This has just been fantastic. Thank you, panelists, so much. Thank you, audience. And and I just want to say, be persistent, be creative. I believe in you. We believe in you. Your voice needs to be heard. The uniqueness of you, your story must be told. In this time of, where we're so going in the opposite direction of that, an audience is craving authentic storytelling. So keep going. Okay. Thanks so much.